Victor Hale ruled the East Coast underworld with an iron fist until the day he vanished. No body, no witnesses, no empire left behind. 6 months of silence, and the streets whispered one name, Elena Brooks, the wife who destroyed him. But what if the most dangerous man alive didn't disappear because he was broken? What if he erased himself to protect the one secret that could bring down everyone who ever crossed him? The truth isn't buried, it's watching, and it's about to surface. If you want to know how far a king will fall for redemption, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Waltz. The rain hammered against the windows of the penthouse like bullets seeking entry, each drop a reminder that even the highest towers weren't safe from the storm. Elena Brooks stood in the center of her former living room, surrounded by moving boxes and the hollow echo of a life being dismantled piece by piece. 6 months had passed since she'd signed the divorce papers. 6 months since she'd walked away from Victor Hale and everything his name represented. The marble floors gleamed under the chandelier's light, reflecting a woman who looked nothing like the socialite wife she'd once been forced to play. Gone were the designer dresses and the practiced smile. In their place, jeans, a simple sweater, and eyes that had learned to see through lies. Mrs. Hale, the movers are asking about the paintings in the master bedroom. The voice belonged to Gerald, her former estate manager. Even he couldn't quite manage to call her anything else, despite the divorce being finalized in public. "It's Ms. Brooks now," Elena corrected quietly, not looking up from the box she was taping shut. "And tell them to leave the paintings. They were always his, not mine." Gerald hesitated in the doorway, his weathered face creasing with something that might have been concern or might have been pity. She'd never been able to tell the difference in this world. "If I may say so, ma'am, you're entitled to much more than you're taking." Elena's hand stilled on the tape dispenser. Entitled. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. She was entitled to nothing from Victor Hale except her freedom, and even that had come with a price she was still calculating. "What I'm entitled to and what I want are two very different things, Gerald. Thank you for your help, but I think I can manage from here." It was a dismissal, gentle but firm. Gerald recognized it for what it was and withdrew with a small bow that belonged to a different era, a different world, Victor's world, where respect was currency and loyalty was bought with blood. When the door clicked shut, Elena allowed herself to sink onto one of the few remaining pieces of furniture, a leather chair that had been Victor's favorite. She'd sat across from him in this chair countless times, watching him read contracts and death warrants with the same clinical detachment, a glass of whiskey always within reach, his wedding ring catching the light like a promise he never quite knew how to keep. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the messages she'd received over the past week. Most were from her lawyer, confirming the final details of the settlement. A few were from old friends, though old was generous. Most had vanished the moment the divorce became public knowledge. In Victor's world, association was contamination, and she'd become toxic the second she'd chosen herself over him. But it was the unknown numbers that made her pause. 3 of them in the last 72 hours. No messages, no voicemails, just missed calls that appeared in her log like question marks she couldn't answer. Elena deleted them and stood, forcing herself back into motion. Stillness invited thinking, and thinking invited remembering. And remembering the man Victor had been, or the man she'd thought he was, would accomplish nothing except reopening wounds that needed to heal. The penthouse had been their kingdom once, 50 floors above the city, insulated from the noise and the chaos and the blood that built Victor's empire. She'd moved through these rooms like a ghost for 3 years, present but not participating, decorative but not essential. The perfect Mafia wife, beautiful, silent, and smart enough to ask no questions. It had taken her 2 years to realize she was in a cage. It had taken another year to find the courage to open the door. Now, packing away the remnants of that life, Elena felt nothing but a hollow relief. The prenuptial agreement Victor's lawyers had forced her to sign meant she left with almost nothing. A modest trust fund, her car, her personal belongings. No claim to properties, businesses, or the vast fortune that flowed through Victor's hands like water. She hadn't fought it. Money from that world came with strings attached, and Elena wanted nothing tying her back to the man who'd loved her like a possession and lost her like a bet. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, she answered. Hello? Silence. But not empty silence, the kind that breathed, that waited, that listened. Who is this? Elena's voice sharpened, her free hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray she now carried everywhere. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, her heart rate elevated but not panicking. Not yet. Wrong numbers happened. Pranks happened. She was learning to separate paranoia from pattern, and one call didn't make a pattern. She returned to packing, but the rhythm was broken now, her movements less certain. The penthouse suddenly felt larger, emptier, full of shadows that hadn't been there moments before. When her phone rang again, a legitimate call this time, her lawyer's name flashing across the screen, Elena answered with relief. Ms. Brooks, I hope I'm not calling too late. Daniel Reeves had been her lifeline through the divorce, a lawyer who specialized in high net worth separations and knew how to navigate the minefield of mob-adjacent wealth. Not at all. I'm just finishing up here. The last of my things should be out by tomorrow. Good, good. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. It's probably nothing, but given your unique circumstances, I thought you should know. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. What is it? I received a call this afternoon from a colleague who works in criminal defense. He mentioned that Victor's name came up in a conversation with federal investigators. They were asking questions about his whereabouts. The room tilted slightly. His whereabouts. Daniel, we've been divorced for 6 months. I have no idea where Victor is or what he's doing. That's rather the point of divorce. I understand that, and I made it clear you're not in contact with him. But Elena, the thing is, no one seems to know where he is. At all. Elena walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city sprawled below, a grid of lights and lives that had nothing to do with her. What do you mean, no one knows? Victor runs half the eastern seaboard. He doesn't just disappear. That's exactly what I thought. But according to my colleague, there's been radio silence from Victor's organization for months. No one's seen him. No one's heard from him. His businesses are operating, but it's all automated, delegation. The man himself has vanished. Elena's reflection stared back at her from the window, and for a moment she didn't recognize the woman she'd become. That's not possible. Victor doesn't delegate. He's a control freak. He can't go 48 hours without checking in on every operation personally. I know, which is why the feds are interested. They're wondering if something happened to him, or if he's planning something big enough that he needs to go underground. And they think I know something. They think you might. You were married to him for 3 years. You shared a life, a home, a bed. It's not unreasonable for them to assume you have information. Elena laughed, a bitter sound that surprised her. I shared a penthouse with a stranger, Daniel. Victor never told me anything about his business. I was a trophy, not a confidant. I believe you, but they might not. I'm telling you this so you're prepared. If the FBI comes knocking, don't say anything without me present. Don't try to be helpful. Don't assume cooperation will make this easier. Just call me. Understood. After they hung up, Elena stood at the window for a long time, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears the building was crying on her behalf. Victor, missing. It should have meant nothing to her. They were divorced. She'd extricated herself from his world. His problems were no longer hers. So why did her hand shake as she set down the phone? Because she knew Victor Hale, knew him in the way you know a storm is coming by the quality of the silence beforehand. He didn't disappear. He didn't retreat. Men like Victor burned until there was nothing left but ash, and even then, the ash was dangerous. If he was gone, it was for a reason. And if that reason ever surfaced, it would drag everyone connected to him straight to hell. The apartment Elena moved into 3 days later was everything the penthouse wasn't. Small, modest, anonymous. A 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood where no one cared who you used to be married to or what name you went by now. The building had security, but not surveillance, neighbors, but not networking. It was perfect. She'd chosen Brooks as her surname deliberately, her mother's maiden name, common enough to disappear into but personal enough to feel like an anchor. Elena Brooks had no history, no connections, no past worth investigating. She was a clean slate, and she intended to keep it that way. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking, job applications, and the careful construction of a new identity. She'd been a literature major before Victor, back when she'd believed in happy endings and the redemptive power of love. Now, she applied for positions at bookstores, libraries, coffee shops, anywhere that paid enough to cover rent, and asked no questions about the gap in her employment history. "Why did you leave your last position?" the manager at the independent bookstore asked during her interview, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who'd built the shop from nothing and wore her success quietly. Elena had practiced this answer. "Personal reasons. I was married to someone whose career demanded a lot of social obligations. After the divorce, I wanted to return to the things I actually cared about: books, reading, helping people discover stories that matter. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth." She got the job. The second week, Elena started to notice the patterns. The black sedan that appeared on her street 3 mornings in a row, always parked in the same spot, always empty when she checked. The man in the coffee shop who read the same newspaper page for 40 minutes while she ate breakfast. The flowers delivered to her apartment with no card, no sender, just 24 white roses that she immediately threw away because Victor had sent her white roses every week of their marriage. Elena told herself it was paranoia. Told herself she was seeing ghosts because she expected to see them. But on the 14th day of her new life, she checked her bank account and found an anonymous deposit of $50,000. Her hands went numb. Her vision tunneled. $50,000 that she hadn't earned, hadn't asked for, hadn't wanted. Money that appeared like a gift or a threat or a reminder that clean breaks were an illusion in Victor's world. She called Daniel immediately. "Can they trace it?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I'll contact the bank, but if it's truly anonymous, it's likely routed through so many shell corporations that finding the source would take months and cost more than the deposit itself." Daniel paused. "Elena, do you think this is from Victor?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it's from someone in his organization who thinks I know something, or someone who wants to implicate me in something. I can't keep it, Daniel. I won't. I'll set up a separate account. We'll quarantine the money there, untouched, until we can determine its origin. In the meantime, I'm going to increase your security consultation. I have a friend who specializes in personal protection for high-risk individuals. Former Secret Service. Discreet. I don't need a bodyguard. You need someone who can tell you if you're being followed and what to do if you are. Please, Elena, let me help you with this." She agreed because the alternative, ignoring it, pretending everything was fine, felt more dangerous than acknowledging the threat. His name was Marcus Webb, and he looked nothing like the muscle-bound thugs who'd surrounded Victor. Marcus was average height, average build, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. Which, he explained when they met at a neutral coffee shop, was exactly the point. "You don't want a bodyguard who looks like a bodyguard," Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee with the methodical calm of someone who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. "You want someone who blends in, who can sit 3 tables away and still keep you in their peripheral vision. Who knows when something's wrong before you do. And you can do that? I've kept senators alive during assassination attempts, and celebrities safe from stalkers who had their daily schedules memorized. Yes, Ms. Brooks, I can keep you safe from whoever's watching you." Elena studied him across the table. "I haven't confirmed anyone's actually watching me." "You don't have to. The pattern of your behavior over the last 2 weeks, changing your route to work daily, checking over your shoulder every 30 seconds, refusing to establish a routine, tells me everything I need to know. You're scared. And in my experience, people who've been married to men like Victor Hale are scared for good reasons." It was the first time someone had acknowledged what Victor was without euphemism or judgment. Not a businessman or a complicated man or any of the other polite fictions people used. Just the truth. Victor Hale was dangerous, and association with him was a liability. "I left him," Elena said quietly. "I divorced him. I'm trying to build a life that has nothing to do with his world. Why won't it let me go?" Marcus's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because you were his wife. In that world, that means something. It means you might know things, or people think you know things, or someone wants to use you to get to him. It doesn't matter that you divorced him. The connection exists, and it'll exist until either he releases you from it publicly or enough time passes that people forget. How much time? Depends on how memorable you were. Elena thought about the society pages, the charity galas, the carefully curated image of Mrs. Victor Hale that had been plastered across newspapers and magazines for 3 years. She'd been very memorable. That had been the problem. So what do I do? You let me watch your back. You don't change your life or hide because that draws more attention than it prevents. You go to work, you come home, you build your new normal. And if anyone makes a move, I'll be there to make sure it doesn't reach you. She hired him that afternoon. But 3 weeks into her new job at the bookstore, Elena almost believed she might actually be safe. The black sedan stopped appearing. The mysterious man with the newspaper vanished. No more anonymous deposits, no more unexplained flowers. Marcus's presence, invisible but constant, seemed to have created a protective perimeter that whoever had been watching respected. She started to sleep through the night, started to think about the future instead of just surviving the present, started to remember what it felt like to be Elena Brooks, not Mrs. Victor Hale. Then came the package. It was waiting on her doorstep when she got home from work on a Tuesday evening, unmarked brown paper, no return address, her name written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Marcus appeared at her elbow before she could pick it up, materializing from wherever he'd been stationed. "Don't touch it." His voice was sharp, professional. "Go inside. I'll handle this." Elena obeyed, her heart hammering. She watched through the peephole as Marcus examined the package with practiced efficiency, checking for wires, weight distribution, any indication of threat. Finally, he picked it up carefully and brought it inside. "It's not a bomb," he said, setting it on her kitchen table, "but I still don't recommend opening it without gloves." "You think it's evidence? Something that could be traced back to me?" "I think it's something someone wants you to have but doesn't want to be connected to, which means it's either information or insurance. Either way, we document everything." Marcus photographed the package from every angle, then carefully slit the paper open with a knife, revealing a plain cardboard box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a burner phone and a USB drive. Elena stared at them like they were venomous snakes. "What the hell?" "Don't turn on the phone yet. Let me check the drive first." Marcus pulled out a laptop. His own, she noticed, not one that could be connected to her, and plugged in the USB drive with the air of someone who'd done this 100 times before. The screen filled with files, dozens of them, spreadsheets, scanned documents, photographs. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he scrolled through them, his expression giving nothing away. "What is it?" Elena couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. "Financial records, shell corporations, offshore accounts, transaction histories. This is..." He trailed off, scrolling faster. "This is a map of a criminal organization's entire financial structure. Every account, every holding, every person on the payroll." "Victor's organization?" "I'd need more time to verify, but based on some of these names and the dates..." Marcus looked up at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something like concern in his eyes. "Yeah, I think this is Victor Hale's empire, laid bare. Every secret, every crime, every dollar. The kind of information that could bring down everyone connected to him. The kind of information that gets people killed just for possessing it." Elena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the nearest chair, her mind racing. "Why would someone send this to me? I don't want this. I don't want anything to do with..." The burner phone rang. They both stared at it. "Don't answer it," Marcus said immediately. But Elena's hand was already reaching out, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name, because somehow she knew who was calling, knew why. She picked up the phone and answered. "Hello, Elena." His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, the kind of voice that commanded rooms and ended arguments. But there was something different underneath it now, something she'd never heard before. Victor Hale sounded tired. "Where are you?" Elena whispered, aware of Marcus recording everything on his phone, aware that this conversation would be evidence, aware that she should hang up and didn't. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one will find me unless I want them to. I'm calling because you need to understand what you're holding." "I don't want it. I want nothing to do with your world. I left, Victor. I got out." "I know, and I'm calling to tell you that you can stay out." The information on that drive, it's everything, every crime I ever committed, every dollar I ever moved, every person I ever paid. It's a roadmap to destroying everything I built, and I'm giving it to you because you're the only person I trust not to use it." Elena laughed, a harsh sound. "You trust me? You didn't trust me with the truth for 3 years of marriage, but now you trust me with evidence that could put you away for life? I trust you to do the right thing, which is nothing. Keep the drive. Hide it. If something happens to me, if I'm killed, if I disappear for real, then you can decide what to do with it. Give it to the FBI. Destroy it, sell it to the highest bidder. Whatever you choose, I won't fight it. But until then, it's insurance. For both of us." "Insurance against what?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "Against the worst parts of myself. Against the men who think I owe them something. Against a world that doesn't let people like me walk away cleanly. Elena, I need you to understand. Everything I've done since the divorce has been to protect you from exactly this kind of thing. But I can't protect you if I don't know you're protected. This drive, it keeps you safe. Because anyone who comes after you knows you can burn them all with what's on it. Why are you doing this? What happened to you?" "I woke up, realized that power is a prison, and I'd been locked in it for so long I forgot what freedom looked like. Realized that the only thing I ever had worth keeping was you, and I lost you because I didn't know how to choose differently." He paused. "I'm choosing differently now, and that choice means disappearing, not just from the FBI or my enemies, from everything, including you. This is goodbye, Elena, the real one, the one I should have given you before. Victor, keep the drive safe. Keep yourself safe. And know that if you never hear from me again, it's because I finally found a way to be free. I hope you find the same thing." The line went dead. Elena sat there, the burner phone in her hand, tears streaming down her face for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. Grief for a marriage that had never been real. Relief that Victor was releasing her, finally, completely. Terror at the weight of what he'd just given her. Marcus cleared his throat gently. "We need to talk about what to do with this information." "I know. The FBI would pay a fortune for it. They'd protect you in exchange for testimony." "I know. Or we could destroy it. Make sure no one can ever use it against you or anyone else." Elena wiped her eyes and looked at the USB drive sitting innocently on her table. Such a small thing. Such devastating power. "He said to keep it. Said it keeps me safe because people know I can destroy them if they come after me." She looked up at Marcus. "Is he right? In that world? Yes. Information like this, it's mutually assured destruction. You can't use it without exposing yourself to retaliation, but the threat of using it keeps everyone at bay. It's a standoff, a very dangerous standoff. But it keeps me safe. It keeps you alive. Safe is a different question." Elena stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life, people coming home from work, families sitting down to dinner, lives that didn't involve burner phones and criminal evidence and ex-husbands who disappeared to protect secrets she didn't understand yet. She wanted that life, the ordinary one, the safe one. But Victor was right about one thing. His world didn't let you go easily. It required insurance, leverage, the kind of power that came from knowing where all the bodies were buried. "We keep it," Elena said finally. "We make copies. One for you to store somewhere secure, one for my lawyer. We document everything about how we received it and when. And we wait." "For what?" "For whatever Victor's running from to catch up. For the truth to surface. For the real reason he gave me this to become clear." She turned from the window, her expression hardening into something that surprised even her. "Victor said he woke up, realized power was a prison, but he's still playing the game, still making moves, still trying to control the outcome from wherever he's hiding. And I'm done being a piece on his board." Marcus nodded slowly. "So we turn the tables." "We turn the tables. We find out what Victor's really protecting, what secret was worth dismantling an empire and disappearing for. And when we know the truth, then we decide what to do with all this power he just handed us." For the first time since the divorce, Elena felt like herself again. Not the trophy wife, not the victim, not the woman running from her past. She was the woman who'd survived Victor Hale, and now she was going to find out what he'd become and why. The investigation began that night. Marcus, it turned out, had contacts in places Elena had never imagined. Former FBI agents who'd gone private, journalists who specialized in organized crime, forensic accountants who could trace money through labyrinths of shell corporations. He assembled a team within 48 hours, all operating under strict NDAs and paid from Elena's settlement fund. If we're doing this, we're doing it right, Marcus explained as he introduced her to the team via encrypted video call. No amateur hour, no mistakes that could blow back on you. We find the truth, we protect you, and we make sure that whatever we discover can't be used to hurt you later. The forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, took the lead on analyzing the USB drive's contents. She worked 18-hour days, mapping connections, flagging anomalies, building a picture of Victor's empire that was both comprehensive and damning. Your ex-husband was meticulous, Rebecca said during one of their updates, her screen filled with flowcharts that looked like neural networks. Every transaction documented, every payment traced. It's almost like he was building evidence against himself deliberately. What do you mean? Elena asked. I mean, this isn't the kind of record-keeping you do to hide your crimes. This is the kind of record-keeping you do when you want to be able to prove exactly what you did and when, like he was preparing for an audit or a confession. The journalist, a grizzled veteran named Tom Pierce, who'd covered organized crime for 30 years, had a different theory. Hale was building an exit strategy, Tom said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd seen every variation of this story. Men at his level don't just walk away. They can't. Too many people depend on them, too many enemies waiting for weakness, too many investments that need protecting. But if you're smart, and Hale was always smart, you build leverage. You document everything. You make sure that if you go down, you can take everyone with you. It keeps people from pulling the trigger. But he didn't just build leverage, Marcus pointed out. He gave it away to his ex-wife. That's not strategy. That's something else. That's love, Rebecca said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. She shrugged. I know it sounds insane, but I've been through these records. I've seen how Hale moved money. There are accounts here that have been quietly funding Elena's trust, her security, her future, all completely anonymized, all set up before the divorce was even finalized. He's been protecting her financially for months, and she never knew. Elena felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. What? Rebecca pulled up a spreadsheet highlighting several accounts. These transactions, they all flow back to you eventually, through so many intermediaries that you'd never trace them. But I can see the pattern. Victor Hale spent the last year of your marriage building you a safety net, and then he set it all up to deploy after the divorce, so you'd have resources even if you took nothing from him. How much? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Including the $50,000 deposit? About $3 million spread across various accounts and trusts. It's all yours. Legally clean, completely untraceable to any criminal activity. He laundered it so thoroughly that even the IRS couldn't connect it to his empire. The room was silent. He loved you, Tom said finally. In whatever broken way a man like that can love someone, he loved you. And when you left, he made sure you'd be okay. Then he vanished to make sure his world couldn't touch you again. Elena stood abruptly, walking away from the computer, from the team, from the revelations that were rewriting everything she thought she understood about her marriage. Victor had loved her. Not well, not healthily, but in the only way he'd known how. By controlling everything, by protecting her from threats she'd never seen, by giving her freedom even as he chained himself to the consequences of his choices. And now he'd disappeared. Not because he was broken, because he was trying to break free. Rebecca, Elena said, turning back to the screen. Those accounts Victor was funding. Were there any others? Any that weren't connected to me? Rebecca's fingers flew across her keyboard. Yes, actually. There's one account that's been receiving regular deposits for about 4 years. Smaller amounts, but consistent, routed through a medical billing company in upstate New York. Medical billing? Marcus leaned forward. That's an odd choice for money laundering. Unless it's not money laundering, Tom interjected. unless it's actually paying for medical care. Rebecca, can you trace where that money's going after it hits the billing company? Rebecca worked in silence for several minutes, her expression growing more concentrated. Finally, she looked up. It's going to a private care facility, Cedar Ridge Residential Center. It's a... Oh. What? Elena demanded. It's a pediatric long-term care facility for children with severe medical needs who require round-the-clock supervision and treatment. The room went very still. Elena's mind raced, connecting dots she'd never seen before. Victor's occasional unexplained absences during their marriage. The phone calls he'd take in another room. The way he'd sometimes look at her with an expression she'd never been able to name. Guilt mixed with longing, mixed with a grief so deep it seemed to have roots in his bones. He has a child, Elena breathed. Victor has a child he never told anyone about. Marcus was already typing on his laptop. Cedar Ridge Residential Center, upstate New York. Let me see what I can find. His fingers flew across the keys, pulling up public records, facility information, anything that might give them a clue. They specialize in neurological conditions, Marcus read aloud. Traumatic brain injuries, genetic disorders, severe developmental disabilities, high-level medical care, very private, very expensive. The kind of place you go when your child needs more than a hospital can provide, but you want them to have the best possible quality of life. Can you find out who the patient is? Elena asked, though part of her already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Not without hacking into medical records, which is illegal and would expose us. But Marcus paused, his expression thoughtful. We could visit, call it due diligence for a potential donation. These private facilities always need funding. They'd give us a tour, let us meet some of the staff, maybe even some of the families. You want to walk into a place Victor's been secretly funding for 4 years and start asking questions. Rebecca looked skeptical. That sounds like a great way to get noticed by whoever's still loyal to him. Or it's the only way we're going to understand what Victor was really protecting. Elena countered. He didn't dismantle his empire and disappear because of business problems. He did it to protect a child he never claimed publicly, a child whose existence is apparently worth more to him than everything he built. Tom Pierce whistled low. If that's true, if Victor Hale has a secret kid in a medical facility, and if anyone in his organization finds out, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in that room understood the implications. Children were leverage. In Victor's world, they were the ultimate weakness, the one vulnerability that couldn't be defended against or controlled. If Victor's enemies knew he had a child, especially a vulnerable child who couldn't be moved or hidden, they would use that child to destroy him. We go tomorrow, Elena decided. Marcus, set it up. Make it look legitimate. And everyone else, keep digging into these records. I want to know everything about Victor's activities over the last year. Where his money went, who he was talking to, what he was planning. Because if we're going to protect this child... Whoa, Marcus interrupted. Protect the child? Elena, you don't even know if this child is Victor's. And even if it is, that's not your responsibility. You divorced him. You got out. You don't owe him protection for a secret he kept from you. Elena met his eyes steadily. I don't owe Victor anything. But if there's a child who's vulnerable, who's caught in the middle of something they didn't choose, then yes, I'm going to protect them. Because that's who I am. That's who I was before Victor, and it's who I'm going to be now that he's gone. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we go tomorrow, but we go carefully. And if anything feels wrong, we walk away. Agreed? Agreed. The meeting ended. Elena sat alone in her apartment afterwards, staring at the USB drive that had started all of this. Victor had called it insurance, protection, mutually assured destruction. But it was more than that. It was a confession, a roadmap, a final act of love from a man who'd never learned how to love without controlling, without owning, without destroying. And somewhere in upstate New York, in a facility designed for broken things that needed careful handling, there was a child. Victor's child. A secret worth burning an empire to protect. Elena picked up her phone and opened a new browser window, searching for Cedar Ridge Residential Center. The website showed a beautiful campus, skilled staff, testimonials from grateful families. It looked like a place designed to give hope to people who'd run out of options. It looked like the kind of place Victor Hale would choose if he'd ever allowed himself to be soft about anything. Tomorrow, she would go there, would walk through those halls and try to find the truth Victor had died to protect, or disappeared to preserve. And whatever she found, whatever secrets were waiting in those carefully maintained rooms, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life would never be simple again. Victor had made sure of that with his final gift. The only question now was whether she had the courage to accept what came next. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, seeing not the trophy wife or the victim or even the survivor. She saw a woman standing at a crossroads, holding evidence that could destroy dozens of lives or save one. Elena Brooks made her choice. She would find the child. She would learn the truth. And then she would decide whether Victor Hale's final act of love deserved protection or exposure. The phone call with Victor echoed in her memory. I hope you find the same thing. Freedom. That's what he'd wished for her. Freedom from his world, from his choices, from the weight of everything he'd been. But freedom, Elena was learning, wasn't about running away. It was about choosing what you fought for and why. Tomorrow, she would start fighting. Not for Victor, not for the past, but for the future of a child who'd never asked to be born into this world of secrets and sins. And maybe, in protecting that innocent life, Elena would finally understand what Victor had been trying to tell her all along. Some loves don't die. They just transform into something bigger than the people who created them. Something worth disappearing for. Something worth finding. The drive upstate took 3 hours through autumn landscape that seemed designed to mock Elena's state of mind. Trees blazed with colors too vibrant to be real, the sky stretched impossibly blue, and the world looked like it had never heard of men who built empires on blood or children hidden in medical facilities. Marcus drove in silence, his eyes checking the mirrors every 30 seconds, a habit Elena had learned meant he was watching for tails. No one's following us, he said finally, as they turned off the highway onto a smaller road that wound through forest. I've been monitoring since we left the city. We're clean. That almost makes it worse. Elena stared out the window at the passing trees. If no one's watching me anymore, it means either Victor really did disappear completely, or whoever was interested decided I'm not worth the effort. Or they're waiting to see what you do with the information you have. Surveillance isn't always about watching every move. Cedar Ridge Residential Center appeared around a curve like something from a storybook, a sprawling campus of brick buildings connected by covered walkways, surrounded by gardens that even in late autumn looked meticulously maintained. A sign at the entrance proclaimed their mission in elegant script, providing exceptional care with dignity and hope. Elena felt her stomach tighten. This was real. Whatever Victor had hidden here, whatever child he'd been protecting, it existed behind those walls, and she was about to walk through the door and demand to see it. Marcus parked in the visitor lot, then turned to her before they got out. Last chance to change your mind. We can turn around right now. Forget we ever found this place. No one would know. I'd know. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt, her hand steadier than her heart. And that child in there, they deserve someone to know they exist. Even if Victor couldn't claim them publicly. The lobby was warm and bright, designed to feel welcoming rather than institutional. Watercolor paintings lined the walls, landscapes, animals, abstract bursts of color that looked like joy translated into paint. A young woman at the reception desk looked up with a practiced smile as they approached. Good morning. Welcome to Cedar Ridge. Do you have an appointment? Yes, under the name Webb, Marcus said smoothly, handing over a business card that identified him as a private wealth manager specializing in philanthropic giving. We spoke with your director, Mrs. Patterson, about a potential facility tour and funding discussion. The receptionist's smile widened. Of course. Let me call up to her office, please. Have a seat. They waited on chairs that were comfortable without being luxurious, appropriate for a place that served families in crisis. Elena watched staff members pass through the lobby. Nurses in cheerful scrubs, therapists carrying equipment, a doctor conferring quietly with someone who must have been a parent. Everyone moved with purpose, but without the harried energy of a typical hospital. This was a place designed for the long haul, for conditions that required years rather than weeks. Mr. Webb? Miss Brooks? A woman in her early 60s approached. her gray hair styled professionally, her handshake firm. I'm Catherine Patterson, the facility director. Thank you so much for coming all this way. We're always grateful when people take an interest in our work. Catherine led them through the facility with the practiced ease of someone who'd given this tour hundreds of times. She showed them the therapy rooms with their specialized equipment, the classrooms adapted for various levels of ability, the sensory gardens designed to provide stimulation for children who experience the world differently. It was impressive and heartbreaking in equal measure, a place built for children who would never have normal lives, but could, with enough support, have meaningful ones. We currently serve 42 children, Catherine explained as they walked through a corridor decorated with more of those vibrant paintings. Ages 3 to 17. Some have been with us since infancy. Others came to us after traditional medical settings couldn't provide the level of ongoing care they needed. Each child has an individualized care plan, and we work closely with families to ensure they're part of the treatment team whenever possible. That must be challenging, Elena said, when some families can't visit regularly. Catherine's expression softened. It is. We have several children whose families live far away or who, for various reasons, can't maintain regular contact. In those cases, we become their family. Our staff members form deep bonds with these kids. They celebrate birthdays, mark milestones, provide the consistency and love every child needs. She paused at a door with a small window. Would you like to meet some of our residents? Elena's heart hammered. Yes, please. The room beyond was set up like a kindergarten classroom, but with modifications, padded floor areas, specialized seating, equipment Elena couldn't identify. 5 children were scattered throughout the space, each engaged with a staff member in different activities. A girl of about 6 worked on a puzzle with oversized pieces. A teenage boy in a wheelchair listened to music through headphones, his expression peaceful. Near the window, a woman in scrubs sat on the floor with a small child, maybe 4 years old, reading a picture book. The child had Victor's eyes. Elena felt the recognition like a physical blow. Those same gray-green eyes, that same serious expression. The child's hair was darker, features softer, but the resemblance was unmistakable to someone who'd spent 3 years studying Victor's face across dinner tables and in the quiet moments before sleep. That's Lily, Catherine said, her voice dropping to the gentle tone people use around the vulnerable. She's one of our youngest residents. Cerebral palsy with significant cognitive impairment from birth complications. She's been with us since she was 11 months old. Does she have family? Marcus asked, his tone carefully neutral. Her mother passed away during childbirth. Her father isn't in the picture. She has a legal guardian who handles her affairs and ensures she has everything she needs, but they don't visit. Some people find it too difficult. Catherine watched Lily with obvious affection. But she's loved here. Our staff adore her, and she's made remarkable progress with her speech therapy. Haven't you, Lily? The little girl looked up at the sound of her name, her gaze finding Catherine. A smile transformed her serious expression into something radiant. Miss Kathy! That's right, sweetheart. You're so smart. Catherine crouched down, not entering the room, but speaking through the doorway. Are you reading with Miss Sarah? Book, Lily said carefully, the word requiring obvious effort. Rabbits. I love that book. You'll have to tell me about it later, okay? Lily nodded, then returned her attention to the story, the interaction already forgotten in the way of small children for whom the present moment is everything. Catherine straightened, leading them away from the door. Lily's care is funded entirely through a private trust, one of our most comprehensive care packages. Whoever set it up wanted to ensure she'd never lack for anything. The best therapist, the latest equipment, whatever she needs to have the best possible quality of life. That's generous, Elena managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. It is, and it makes a tremendous difference. We can provide good care to all our children, but when funding is unlimited, we can provide exceptional care. Lily gets 4 hours of therapy daily, physical, occupational, and speech. She has her own room decorated exactly to her needs. She'll be able to stay here as long as she needs, transitioning to our adult care facility when she's older if necessary. Someone loved her enough to plan for her entire future. Someone loved her. Victor loved her. This child with his eyes and his serious expression and a whole life ahead of her that would be defined by limitations she'd done nothing to deserve. Elena felt tears burning her eyes and blinked them back. Could we make a donation specifically to Lily's care fund? Add to what's already there? Catherine looked pleased and slightly surprised. That's very kind. May I ask why Lily specifically? Because every child deserves to know someone's thinking of them, Elena said softly, even if they never meet. They completed the tour in a blur of additional rooms and explanations Elena barely processed. Her mind was stuck in that classroom, watching a 4-year-old girl struggle to say the word rabbits while staff members celebrated the achievement like she'd just solved quantum physics. This was Victor's daughter, the secret he'd protected, the reason he'd dismantled everything. When they returned to the car, Elena sat in silence for several minutes before speaking. Her mother died in childbirth. Victor never mentioned being with anyone before me, which means Lily was born during our marriage, or just before. She turned to Marcus. He had a child with someone else and never told me. Set up a trust fund, paid for all her care, visited her. He must have visited her during those unexplained absences, and I never knew, never suspected. I'm sorry. Marcus's voice was genuine. That's a betrayal on top of everything else. Is it? Elena stared out at the facility, at the building where Lily was probably still listening to the story about rabbits, unaware that her father had burned his entire world to keep her safe. He was protecting her. From his world. From his enemies. From anyone who might use her as leverage, including me. You're being awfully understanding about your husband having a secret child. Ex-husband. And I don't know what I am. Angry, yes. Hurt, definitely. But also, Elena struggled to articulate the tangle of emotions. Also understanding why he did it. I saw what his world was like. The violence, the constant threat, the way everyone was a potential target. If people had known about Lily, what do you think would have happened to her? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Nothing good? Exactly. So he hid her, made sure she was cared for, set up funding that couldn't be traced back to him, and never claimed her publicly. It was the only way to keep her safe. And now he's disappeared to keep her safe permanently, Marcus added. Because as long as Victor Hale exists, someone could eventually find out about her, could use her to get to him. But if Victor Hale is dead or gone, then Lily is just another child in a care facility. No connection to the mob, no value as leverage. She becomes invisible again, which in Victor's world is the same as safe. Elena felt a strange clarity settling over her. The USB drive, the evidence, all of it, that's not insurance for me. It's insurance for her. If anyone ever connects Lily to Victor, I can use that information to destroy them before they can hurt her. That's a hell of a responsibility to take on for a child who isn't yours. I know. Elena met his gaze. But what's the alternative? Pretend I never found out? Walk away and hope Victor's plan works? Hope no one ever discovers her? That would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. I'm tired of being safe. I was safe in that penthouse, and it made me a ghost. I was safe when I signed the divorce papers and took nothing. But Lily doesn't get to choose safety. She doesn't get to walk away from who her father was or the danger that comes with that. So if I can help protect her, even just by knowing the truth and being ready to act if needed. Elena trailed off, surprised by the conviction in her own voice. Marcus started the car. Then I guess we need to find out everything we can about Lily's legal guardian. Because whoever that is, they're the only other person besides us who knows the connection between that little girl and Victor Hale. The drive back to the city was spent making calls. Rebecca dove into public records, searching for any documentation about Lily's guardianship. Tom reached out to his contacts in family law, trying to understand how someone could set up this kind of arrangement without leaving obvious trails. And Marcus made quiet inquiries through his network about whether anyone in Victor's former organization had ever mentioned a child. By the time they reached Elena's apartment, a picture was emerging. Rebecca called with the findings, her voice tight with frustration. The Guardian is listed as a law firm, Hastings and Bromwell. They're a boutique estate planning firm, very discreet, the kind of place wealthy people use when they want absolute privacy. Lily's trust is managed through them. All her decisions are made by a senior partner named Richard Hastings. I tried calling, but they wouldn't confirm or deny having a client named Lily without proper authorization. which we don't have and can't get without exposing ourselves, Elena finished. Exactly. But I did find something interesting. Hastings and Bromwell have been Victor's personal attorneys for 15 years. Not his business attorneys. Those were the sharks at Morrison and Klein who handled all his contracts and legal issues. Hastings and Bromwell handled his personal estate, his will, his private affairs. Elena felt pieces clicking together. So Victor set up Lily's guardianship through lawyers he trusted with his personal life. Lawyers who would have attorney-client privilege protecting any information about her. And who would have instructions about what to do in various scenarios, Rebecca continued, including, I'd bet, what to do if Victor died or disappeared. This wasn't just a care arrangement, this was a succession plan. Tom Pierce joined the call, his gravelly voice cutting through. I talked to a family law specialist. Setting up this kind of guardianship for a child whose mother is deceased and whose father is, let's say, absent, requires court approval. But if you have the right lawyers and the right judge, you can seal the records, make them invisible to anyone who doesn't have legal standing to access them. Which means Lily's entire legal existence is protected, Marcus said. No one can prove Victor is her father without accessing sealed court records, which would require a court order, which would require evidence that there's a reason to look in the first place. It's a perfect circle, Elena said slowly. Victor protected her by making her legally invisible, and as long as he stays gone, there's no reason for anyone to look for connections that don't officially exist. So what do we do? Rebecca asked. We know the truth, but we can't prove it without exposing Lily. And if we expose Lily, we make her a target, Elena finished. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. We do nothing. We sit on this information. We keep the USB drive safe, and we hope Victor's plan works. And if it doesn't? Tom's question hung in the air. Elena thought about Lily's smile, the careful way she'd pronounced rabbits, the trust in her eyes as she looked at the woman reading to her. She thought about Victor's voice on that phone call, tired and resolved. She thought about the life she'd built since the divorce. Small and safe and utterly separate from the world that had created this impossible situation. Then we protect her, Elena said firmly. Whatever it takes, however we can. Because she's innocent in all this. And if there's one good thing I can do with everything Victor left me, it's making sure his daughter stays safe. The team signed off one by one, promising to keep monitoring for any signs that Lily's secret had been compromised. Marcus lingered after the others disconnected, studying Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're not just doing this because you feel guilty about divorcing him, are you? He asked quietly. No, I'm doing this because it's right. Because I looked at that little girl and saw a child who didn't ask to be born into this mess. Because protecting her is the one thing Victor did that was actually good. And if he can't do it anymore, someone has to. Marcus nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. It's not the easy choice, but it's the right one. After he left, Elena sat in her apartment surrounded by the evidence of her new life. The books she'd unpacked from her personal collection, not Victor's library. The modest furniture she'd chosen herself. The walls bare of the expensive art that had decorated the penthouse. Everything here was hers, earned or bought with money from the settlement, untainted by Victor's world. Except now it was all connected again. Because Victor had made sure of it with that USB drive and that phone call and the daughter he'd hidden so well that even his wife hadn't known she existed. Elena pulled out her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding since the divorce. She searched for news about Victor Hale. The results were sparse. A few articles from 6 months ago when business reporters noticed his absence from various boards and functions. Speculation about his health, his business prospects, rumors of federal investigations. But nothing concrete, nothing confirmed. Victor Hale had simply stopped appearing in public, and the world had gradually stopped asking why. She dug deeper, searching for anything about his associates, his businesses, his known enemies. What she found painted a picture of an empire in slow-motion collapse. Companies Victor had controlled were being sold off or absorbed by competitors. Associates who'd once been his closest allies had distanced themselves publicly. The carefully constructed network that had made Victor one of the most powerful men on the East Coast was dissolving like it had never existed. It was masterful, really. Victor hadn't just disappeared. He'd systematically dismantled everything that gave him power, everything that made him valuable as an enemy or an asset. He'd made himself irrelevant, which in his world was the same as making himself invisible, and he'd done it all to protect a little girl who would never know his name. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her heart stuttered, thinking of the burner phone, of Victor's voice. But when she opened it, the message was simple. The account you inquired about has received another deposit, same source, same amount. Want me to trace it? It was from Rebecca, using a secure messaging app. Elena stared at the message, understanding immediately what it meant. Someone was still funding Lily's care, which meant someone still knew about her, still had access to the accounts Victor had set up. Victor himself? Or someone he'd trusted to continue the payments if he couldn't? Elena typed back, "Yes, trace it as far as you can without exposing yourself. I need to know who else knows about Lily." The response came quickly. "On it. We'll have answers by morning." Elena set down the phone and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Victor was alive or dead, free or imprisoned, at peace or in hiding. And somewhere in upstate New York, Lily was sleeping in a room designed for her specific needs, surrounded by people who cared for her but would never know the full story of why she mattered. 2 lives, connected by a man who'd loved badly but protected fiercely. And Elena, standing in the middle, holding the evidence that could destroy them all or save the one person who deserved saving. Her phone rang, not a text this time, but an actual call. The number was blocked. Elena answered, her voice steady. "Hello? Ms. Brooks." The voice was male, older, cultured. Not Victor. "My name is Richard Hastings. I believe you visited Cedar Ridge Residential Center today." Elena's blood ran cold. "How did you—" "I'm Lily's legal guardian, Ms. Brooks. The facility notifies me of all visitors, and they were particularly impressed by your generous offer to contribute to her care fund. I wanted to reach out personally to thank you." He paused. "And to ask why Victor Hale's ex-wife is suddenly interested in a child she has no official connection to." Elena's mind raced. Deny everything? Admit the truth? Try to bluff her way through? She settled on something in between. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Hastings. I visited Cedar Ridge as part of a charitable giving initiative. Lily happened to be one of the children we met during the tour." "Of course." Hastings' tone suggested he didn't believe a word. "Just as I'm sure it's pure coincidence that you received a package 3 days ago containing information that could only have come from one source." Elena sat down slowly. "You know about the USB drive." "I know about everything, Ms. Brooks. I've been Victor's personal attorney for 15 years. I handled his estate planning, his trusts, his most private affairs, including the arrangements for his daughter. And I know that 2 weeks ago, Victor contacted me with specific instructions about what to do if certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" "If you received the evidence package, if you tried to find Lily, if you demonstrated any interest in protecting her rather than exploiting the information you'd been given." Hastings sighed, a sound heavy with years. "Victor wanted to know if you were the woman he believed you to be, or if the divorce had changed you into someone else." "This was a test?" Elena's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. "He's testing me? He's ensuring his daughter's future is in the right hands. Ms. Brooks, Victor is dying." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Hastings continued, his voice gentle now. "Terminal brain tumor. Inoperable. He has perhaps 6 months, likely less. The headaches started during the last year of your marriage. By the time he got the diagnosis, it was already too late for treatment. Everything he's done since then, the divorce, the disappearance, dismantling his organization, it's all been about preparing for a death he knows is coming." "He never told me." Elena's voice cracked. "We were married, and he was dying, and he never said a word. He didn't want your pity, didn't want you to stay out of obligation. Victor wanted you to leave him because you chose to, not because circumstances trapped you. And he wanted to handle his death the same way he handled his life, by controlling every variable he could. Except Lily." Except Lily, Hastings agreed. She's the one variable he can't control beyond the grave, the one person who'll still need protection after he's gone, which is why he needed to know if you were someone who could be trusted with that responsibility. Elena felt tears streaming down her face, hot and angry and confused. I divorced him. I left. Why would he think I'd protect a child I never knew existed? Because you visited her. Because you offered to add to her care fund without knowing who she really was. Because when you found out the truth, your first instinct wasn't to expose her or use her as leverage, but to protect her. Hastings paused. You're exactly who Victor hoped you'd be, Ms. Brooks, which is why I'm calling to make you an offer. What kind of offer? Become Lily's guardian after Victor dies. Not legally. That would create a connection between you that could be exploited, but practically. I'll retain legal guardianship, but you'll have decision-making authority over her care, her education, her life. You'll be the one who knows her, who visits her, who ensures she has everything she needs. Elena stood, pacing her small living room. You're asking me to take responsibility for the child my husband had with another woman, while he was married to me. I'm asking you to take responsibility for an innocent little girl who'll be orphaned soon and whose only crime was being born to a man who loved her but couldn't keep her safe. Hastings' voice hardened slightly. Victor is prepared to compensate you, of course. The full trust fund he set up for you, the $3 million you recently discovered, is contingent on your acceptance of this arrangement. Refuse, and it disappears. I don't want his money. Then do it for free. But do it. Because the alternative is that Lily grows up with excellent medical care and material comfort, but without a single person in her life who knows the whole truth of who she is. Without anyone who can tell her about her father when she's old enough to ask. Without anyone to fight for her if the carefully constructed protections Victor built ever fail. Elena stopped pacing, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked tired, lost. Nothing like the woman who'd walked away from Victor 6 months ago determined to build a new life. But maybe this was the new life. Not the one she'd planned, but the one she was being called to live. I need to think about it, she said finally. You have 1 week. After that, Victor wants an answer. If it's no, he'll make other arrangements. Less ideal arrangements, but workable. Hastings softened his tone. For what it's worth, Ms. Brooks, I think you'd be good for Lily. Victor thinks so too. He may have been a terrible husband, but he's trying to be a good father, even from the grave. The call ended. Elena stood in the silence of her apartment, surrounded by the pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. Victor hadn't just given her evidence and disappeared. He'd given her a purpose, a reason to use everything he'd taught her about his world, everything she'd learned about survival and protection and the brutal calculus of keeping people safe. He'd given her a daughter. Not biologically, not legally, but in every way that would matter once he was gone. Elena picked up the burner phone Victor had sent, the one she'd been afraid to turn on since that first call. She powered it on, waiting. It rang within 30 seconds. You talked to Hastings. Victor's voice was weaker than before, rougher. She could hear the illness in it now, the way it scraped against his words. You're dying. Yes. You were dying when I divorced you. Yes. Elena closed her eyes. You let me think you were this all-powerful man who'd lost control of his wife. You let the whole world think the divorce broke you. But really, you were already broken. You were dying and you were trying to protect Lily, and I had no idea. I needed you free of me before the end. Needed you to have a choice about what came next instead of being trapped by obligation or grief. Victor coughed, a wet sound that made Elena wince. I'm sorry for all of it. For the marriage that wasn't what you deserved. For the secrets, for putting you in this position now. Why me, Victor? Why am I the one you trust with your daughter? Because you're good. Not good at playing the game or good at surviving my world. Just good. The kind of good that makes you visit a child you don't know and offer to help without asking what's in it for you. The kind of good I never learned how to be. His voice cracked slightly. I loved you, Elena. Badly, possessively, all wrong. But I loved you. And I trust you to love my daughter better than I ever loved anyone. Elena sat down, the phone pressed to her ear, tears falling freely now. She has your eyes. I know. First thing I noticed when she was born, Thought maybe it was a curse passing that on to her. All the things these eyes have seen. Victor was quiet for a moment. Will you do it? Will you take care of her after I'm gone? I don't know how. I don't know anything about special needs children or medical care or... You'll learn. You're smart. You'll figure it out. And Hastings will help. The facility staff will help. You won't be alone in this. I'll be alone in knowing the truth, in carrying the weight of who she really is. Yes, Victor said simply. I'm sorry for that too. But there's no one else I trust. No one else who'd protect her without trying to use her. You're it, Elena. You're the only person in my whole miserable life who ever chose kindness over advantage. Elena thought about Lily's smile, about the way she'd carefully pronounced rabbits, about a future where that little girl would need someone who knew her whole story, who could tell her about the father who'd loved her enough to erase himself from her life. 1 week, Elena said. Hastings said I have 1 week to decide. Take it. Think it through. Make the choice that's right for you, not for me. I'm past the point where my needs matter. Victor, I have to go. The pain gets bad at night, and I can't think clearly when it does. But Elena, thank you. For listening. For visiting her. For being exactly who I remembered. He hung up before she could respond. Elena sat in the darkness, the phone in her hand, the weight of Victor's dying wish pressing down on her like gravity itself. 1 week to decide if she would take responsibility for a child who wasn't hers, protect a secret that could destroy her, and step back into the orbit of a world she'd fought so hard to escape. 1 week to choose between the safe life she'd built and the meaningful one Victor was offering. 1 week to decide who Elena Brooks really was and what she was willing to sacrifice to protect an innocent life. She looked at the USB drive sitting on her table, at the evidence of Victor's empire, at the insurance policy that was really an inheritance, and she knew, deep in her bones, that the choice had already been made. Had been made the moment she saw Lily's eyes and recognized them as Victor's. Had been made when she offered to add to a stranger's care fund without knowing why it mattered. She would protect Lily, would become the guardian Victor needed her to be, would carry the secret and the burden and the strange, complicated love that came with raising a child who would never know the full truth of her origins. Not because Victor asked, not because of the money or the obligation or the weight of their failed marriage, but because Lily deserved someone who chose her, who fought for her, who loved her not despite her connection to Victor Hale, but separate from it entirely. Elena picked up her phone and called Hastings. I don't need a week, she said when he answered. My answer is yes. Hastings was silent for 3 full seconds, and in that silence, Elena heard the weight of what she'd just committed to. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. I'll have the paperwork drawn up. You'll need to come to my office tomorrow to sign the guardianship documents. They're structured so that your role remains invisible to outside scrutiny. You'll be listed as a family friend who's taken an interest in Lily's welfare. Nothing that would raise flags or create legal connections that could be exploited. And Victor? Does he know I've agreed? I'll inform him tonight. It'll give him peace knowing she'll be cared for. Hastings paused. Ms. Brooks, I want you to understand what you're taking on. This isn't just about visiting a child or making medical decisions. Victor's enemies are still out there. His empire may be dismantled, but the people who worked for him, who lost power when he disappeared, they'll be looking for leverage if they ever discover he had a weakness they didn't know about. Which is why Lily stays hidden, why no one can know the connection. Exactly. You'll need to be careful, strategic. Never visit on a predictable schedule. Never mention her to anyone outside the team you've already assembled. And if anything feels wrong, if you ever sense someone watching or asking questions, I call you immediately and we activate whatever contingency plan Victor set up. He set up several, Hastings said grimly, including one that involves moving Lily to a different facility under a different name. It would mean starting over, new doctors, new therapists, disrupting everything she knows, but it would keep her safe. Elena thought about Lily's smile, the comfort she seemed to take in familiar faces and routines. The idea of uprooting that stability made her chest ache. Then we make sure it never comes to that. We protect the secret so well that no one ever has reason to look. After the call ended, Elena sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, trying to process the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. She'd spent 6 months building a life separate from Victor Hale, and in one evening she'd voluntarily walked back into his orbit. Not as his wife this time, but as something stranger and more complicated. The guardian of his hidden child, the keeper of his final secret, the one person he trusted with the truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Rebecca traced the latest payment. You're going to want to hear this. Coming over. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat across from her at the small kitchen table that was nothing like the massive dining table in the penthouse. He had his laptop open, Rebecca on a video call, her face drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like fear. The payment came from an account in the Cayman Islands, Rebecca said without preamble. Normally, that's where the trail would end. Offshore banking secrecy laws, layers of corporate shells, impossible to penetrate. But whoever set this up made a mistake. A tiny one, but enough. What kind of mistake? Elena leaned forward. They used the same routing pattern as one of the accounts on Victor's USB drive. Same delays between transfers, same series of banks, same final destination protocol. It's like a fingerprint. And when I matched it against the other accounts Victor controlled, I found something interesting. This particular pattern was only used for one type of transaction. Marcus caught on first. Payments Victor made personally. Not through his organization, not through intermediaries. His own money, moved the way he specifically set it up. Exactly, Rebecca confirmed. Which means either Victor is still alive and still making these payments himself, or someone has access to his personal accounts and is continuing them on his behalf. Elena's mind raced. Hastings said Victor's dying. Brain tumor, maybe 6 months left. But that was weeks ago when he gave me the USB drive. What if he's already dead? Marcus finished. And someone else is maintaining the illusion that he's alive to keep Lily's funding secure. Or what if he's still alive but incapacitated? Rebecca suggested. Brain tumors can progress rapidly. He could be in a facility somewhere, unable to communicate, and someone he trusted is handling his affairs. Elena stood, pacing the small space. Hastings knew about the payment to me answering. He knew Victor wanted to make sure I'd take care of Lily. That suggests Victor was alive as of a few days ago at least, unless Hastings is lying. Why would he lie? Marcus asked. I don't know. Maybe Victor's already dead and Hastings is buying time to ensure the transition is smooth. Maybe he's protecting other secrets we don't know about yet. Maybe the whole dying story is a fiction designed to manipulate me into taking guardianship. Rebecca shook her head. I don't think so. I've been digging into Hastings and Bromwell. They're legitimate, well-respected, no red flags. Richard Hastings has represented some of the wealthiest families on the East Coast for 40 years. His reputation is spotless. If he says Victor's dying, I believe him. But you can't confirm it, Elena pressed. You can't prove Victor's alive or dead or where he is. No, Rebecca admitted. He's a ghost, which, given what we know about his situation, makes sense. If you're dying and trying to protect a secret daughter from a lifetime of threats, you don't exactly check yourself into a hospital under your real name. Marcus closed his laptop. So we're operating on faith. Faith that Hastings is telling the truth. Faith that Victor really is dying and these payments are part of a legitimate plan. Faith that we're not being manipulated into something we can't see yet. That's about the size of it, Elena said quietly. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. But here's what I keep coming back to. Lily is real. Her needs are real. Whether Victor's alive or dead, whether he's manipulating me or genuinely trying to protect his daughter, that little girl still needs someone to advocate for her. And if I walk away because I'm afraid of being used, who does that help? It helps you stay safe, Marcus said, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's everything wrong with it if it means abandoning a child who never asked to be born into this situation. Elena turned back to face them. I told Hastings yes, I'm taking guardianship. And if that means I'm being manipulated, if that means I'm walking into something dangerous, then at least I'm doing it with my eyes open. Rebecca's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. It's terrifying and complicated and probably going to blow up in ways we can't predict, but it's right. Keep monitoring those payments, Elena said. I want to know the second anything changes. And Marcus, I'm going to need you to do a full security assessment of Cedar Ridge. I want to know every way someone could get to Lily if they wanted to, every vulnerability, every gap in their protocols. Already on it, Marcus replied. I started making calls while I was driving over. I should have a preliminary report in 48 hours. After they left, Elena pulled out the burner phone again, staring at it like it might offer answers. Victor had called her twice now, once to explain the USB drive, once after she'd visited Lily. Both times he'd sounded weak but coherent. Both times he'd sounded like a man preparing for death, not a man already gone. She wanted to call him, wanted to demand answers about the payments, about his condition, about what he really expected from her. But something stopped her. Some instinct that said the less she pushed, the more Victor would reveal on his own timeline. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching cerebral palsy. If she was going to be Lily's guardian, she needed to understand what that meant, what challenges the girl faced, what her future might look like, what kind of support would help her thrive within her limitations. The reading was overwhelming. Cerebral palsy was an umbrella term covering a wide range of motor disorders caused by brain damage before, during, or shortly after birth. Severity varied dramatically. Some people with CP lived independently, had careers, raised families. Others required lifelong intensive care. Lily, based on what Catherine had said about significant cognitive impairment, fell somewhere in the middle or toward the more severe end of the spectrum. Elena read case studies, parent testimonials, medical journals. She learned about physical therapy protocols, communication devices, educational approaches. She learned that children with CP could make progress well into their teenage years with consistent intervention. She learned that quality of life depended less on the severity of impairment than on the support system surrounding the child. She learned that loving a child with special needs required a kind of patience and dedication she'd never had to practice before. That celebrating small victories, a word pronounced clearly, a movement achieved independently, a smile of recognition became the measure of success. And she learned that despite everything, children like Lily could be happy, could form connections, experience joy, live lives that mattered even if they didn't look like typical lives. By the time Elena closed her laptop, the sun was rising over the city. She'd been awake all night, and she had to be at Hastings' office in 3 hours to sign the guardianship papers. She should sleep, but her mind was too full, her emotions too raw. Instead, she showered, dressed carefully in clothes that looked professional without trying too hard, and made herself breakfast she barely tasted. This was real. In a few hours, she would legally become responsible for a 4-year-old girl she'd met once, the daughter of a man who'd lied to her for 3 years of marriage. The absurdity should have stopped her. The sheer insanity of it should have sent her running back to the safe, small life she'd been building. But when Elena thought about Lily's eyes, Victor's eyes, looking up from that picture book, she knew there was no going back. Whatever happened next, whoever Victor really was or what his motivations had been, Lily deserved someone to fight for her. And Elena had spent too many years not fighting for anything that mattered. Hastings and Bromwell occupied a discreet office in a brownstone in the financial district, the kind of place where wealth went to hide from public scrutiny. No flashy signage, no lobby full of junior associates trying to impress, just a brass plaque beside a solid wooden door and a receptionist who looked like she'd been guarding secrets since before Elena was born. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Hastings is expecting you. 3rd floor, last door on the right. The office was exactly what Elena expected. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with law books that looked actually read rather than decorative. Richard Hastings stood when she entered, a tall man in his late 60s with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired trust and fear in equal measure. Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, professional. Please sit. Can I offer you coffee? Tea? Coffee, thank you. He poured from a carafe that sat on a credenza, the ritual giving them both a moment to settle. When he handed her the cup, their eyes met, and Elena saw something in his gaze that hadn't been there on the phone. Respect. I've represented Victor Hale for 15 years, Hastings said, settling into the chair behind his desk. In that time, I've seen him make brilliant decisions and catastrophic mistakes. I've watched him build an empire and then systematically destroy it. but I've never seen him put this much faith in another person. You should understand that before you sign these documents. Victor doesn't trust easily, and he certainly doesn't trust anyone with the thing he loves most in this world. How is he? Elena asked. Really, not the official version, not the story designed to get me to cooperate. The truth. Hastings sighed, and suddenly he looked every year of his age. He's failing. The tumor has progressed faster than the doctors predicted. He has lucid days, and days where the pain and confusion are so severe he can barely speak. I visit him 3 times a week at the facility where he's staying, and each time I see him less of the man I knew and more of what the disease is making him. Where is he? I can't tell you that, for your protection as much as his. If you don't know where he is, no one can force that information from you. Hastings opened a folder on his desk. But I can tell you he's comfortable. He has around-the-clock medical care, pain management, everything he needs, and he's using whatever time he has left to ensure Lily's future is secure. Elena set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. Does she know? Does Lily know her father is dying? She doesn't know she has a father, not in any meaningful way. Victor visited her regularly until the symptoms made it too dangerous. The headaches, the occasional confusion. The last thing he wanted was to frighten her or to have her remember him as someone unstable. So he stopped visiting about 4 months ago, told the facility staff he was traveling for work and would be away for an extended period. She must miss him. Children with Lily's level of cognitive impairment experience relationships differently. She recognized him, enjoyed his visits, but without the same emotional continuity a typical child would have. She's adapted to his absence without apparent distress, which Victor found both relieving and heartbreaking. Hastings pulled several documents from the folder, spreading them across the desk. These are the guardianship papers. They establish you as Lily's advocate in all non-legal matters, medical decisions, educational planning, quality of life choices. I retain official guardianship for legal purposes, but in practice you'll be making the calls. You'll meet with her doctors, her therapist, the facility director. You'll be the one she comes to know as the constant in her life. Elena scanned the documents, the legal language making her head spin. And if something happens to you? If you can't continue as legal guardian? There's a succession plan. 2 other partners in this firm are prepared to take over, both fully briefed on Lily's situation and Victor's wishes. But you'll remain the primary advocate regardless of who holds legal guardianship. These documents ensure that. What about money? The trust fund, the ongoing payments, all handled through structures that will survive Victor's death. Lily's care is funded in perpetuity. You'll have access to those funds for anything she needs, and a quarterly allowance for your time and expenses. Victor was very specific that you shouldn't bear the financial burden of this arrangement. Elena looked up sharply. I don't want his money. Not for myself. Then donate the allowance to charity. Use it to pay your team. Do whatever your conscience demands. But the structure remains because Victor insisted on it. Hastings' expression gentled. He knows what he's asking of you, Ms. Brooks. He knows this will change your life in ways you can't fully anticipate yet. The allowance is his way of acknowledging that. Please don't refuse it out of pride. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the moral high ground of doing this purely for Lily's sake. But Hastings was right. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. If she was going to protect Lily properly, she needed resources, needed the ability to act quickly if threats emerged, needed to maintain the security team that was already proving invaluable. Fine. I'll take the allowance. But it goes toward protecting her, not enriching me. Agreed. Hastings slid the documents closer. Read them carefully. Ask any questions you have. And when you're ready, sign at the marked tabs. Elena read every word, asked a dozen questions about clauses and contingencies and what-if scenarios. Hastings answered each one patiently, explaining the legal architecture Victor had built to protect his daughter. It was thorough, sophisticated, and clearly the product of years of planning. Victor hadn't just prepared for his death, he'd prepared for every possible aftermath. When she finally signed her name on the last page, Elena felt something shift inside her. This was real now. Legal. Binding. She was responsible for a child who would never be hers, but who depended on her nonetheless. There's one more thing, Hastings said as he gathered the signed documents. Victor wanted you to have this. He pulled a sealed envelope from his desk drawer, her name written on it in handwriting she recognized from 3 years of marriage. Elena took it with shaking hands. "What is it?" "I don't know. He sealed it himself, told me to give it to you after you signed the papers. Said you'd need to read it before you visited Lily again." She stared at the envelope, afraid of what it might contain. A confession, an apology, instructions she wasn't ready to follow? "Read it in your own time," Hastings said gently. "But Ms. Brooks, Elena, if I may, thank you for doing this, for being someone Victor could trust, for giving him peace in his final months." "I'm not doing it for Victor." "I know. That's exactly why he trusted you." Elena left the office with the envelope burning like a brand in her purse. She made it 2 blocks before she had to stop, ducking into a coffee shop and finding a corner table where she could open it with some privacy. The handwriting was shakier than she remembered, the letters uneven in a way that spoke of pain or medication or the simple deterioration of fine motor control. But the words were pure Victor, precise, controlled, revealing emotion only in what they didn't say. "Elena, if you're reading this, you've signed the papers. You've agreed to take care of Lily. I need you to know what that means, not just legally, but personally. You're going to meet doctors who will give you statistics about her limitations. You're going to hear words like severe impairment and developmental delay and lifelong dependency. You're going to be told what she'll never be able to do. Don't listen. Or rather, listen, but don't let those words define her. Lily is more than her diagnosis. She's curious. She loves music. She has the most infectious laugh I've ever heard. When she smiles, it feels like the only thing I ever did right. I need you to see that in her. See past the wheelchair and the communication difficulties and all the ways she doesn't fit the world's definition of normal. See Lily, the real girl, not the medical file. And when you visit her, don't go as her guardian or as someone fulfilling an obligation. Go as someone who wants to know her, because she deserves that. Deserves someone who sees her as a person, not a responsibility. I never learned how to do that properly, how to love without controlling, how to protect without suffocating. But I think you know how. You did it for me, even when I didn't deserve it. You saw the man I could have been underneath the monster I'd become. Do that for Lily, see who she is and who she can become, and help her get there. That's all I'm asking. That's everything I'm asking. Thank you for giving me this gift, the knowledge that she won't be alone, that someone will fight for her when I can't anymore. I don't deserve your kindness, Elena, but Lily does. And that's enough. Victor. Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face in a coffee shop full of strangers who pretended not to notice. This was the Victor she'd glimpsed occasionally during their marriage. The man beneath the armor, vulnerable and aware of his own brokenness. The man who loved his daughter enough to admit he didn't know how to show it properly. She folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. "I need you to drive me upstate. Tomorrow morning, I'm ready to visit Lily again." His response came quickly. "I'll pick you up at 8. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the letter, about Victor's words, about the weight of seeing someone as a person rather than a diagnosis or obligation. She thought about her own life, how she'd felt invisible in the penthouse, decorative but not essential, how Victor had seen her as a beautiful object to possess rather than a person with her own dreams and needs. And she thought about Lily, who probably experienced being overlooked in different but equally painful ways, who was defined by what she couldn't do rather than celebrated for what she could, who deserved someone to fight for her humanity, not just her medical care. Elena pulled out her laptop and composed an email to Catherine Patterson at Cedar Ridge, requesting a meeting to discuss Lily's care plan and introducing herself as a friend of the family who'd be taking a more active role in the girl's life. She kept it vague but warm, professional but personal. The response came within an hour, even though it was nearly midnight. Catherine must keep odd hours, Elena thought, or maybe insomnia was an occupational hazard when you worked with medically fragile children. "Ms. Brooks, I'm so pleased to hear you'll be more involved in Lily's care. She's a remarkable little girl who would benefit enormously from consistent visits and personal attention. I'd be happy to meet with you at your convenience. We could also arrange for you to spend time with Lily in a less formal setting than the classroom, perhaps in our family visiting room, or even outdoors in the garden if the weather permits. Building rapport takes time, especially with children like Lily who need to feel safe before they open up. But I have a feeling you two will get along wonderfully. Looking forward to seeing you again, Catherine Patterson. Elena read the email twice, feeling something loosen in her chest. Catherine didn't know the whole truth, but she clearly cared about Lily, wanted what was best for her. That mattered more than Elena had expected it to. She typed back, "Thank you, Catherine. I'd love to meet in the family visiting room if possible. I want Lily to feel comfortable, and a more casual environment seems ideal. Would tomorrow afternoon work? I know it's short notice, but I'm eager to begin building that rapport you mentioned." Elena. The response was almost immediate. "Tomorrow at 2 works perfectly. I'll make sure Lily's schedule allows for an extended visit. See you then." Elena closed her laptop and finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building for days. She was doing this, really doing it. Tomorrow, she would walk back into Cedar Ridge not as a curious visitor, but as the person responsible for a little girl's future. The terror of that responsibility should have kept her awake. Instead, it lulled her into the deepest sleep she'd had in months. Marcus arrived at 8 sharp, as promised. They drove in companionable silence for the first hour, the landscape rolling past in shades of gold and crimson as autumn deepened toward winter. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Rebecca found something else last night, another pattern in Victor's accounts." Elena turned from the window. "What kind of pattern?" "Payments to medical facilities. Not just Cedar Ridge. There's a hospice in Vermont receiving regular transfers. Same security protocols, same routing patterns as Lily's trust." The air in the car seemed to thicken. "You think that's where Victor is?" "I think it's likely. Rebecca's trying to confirm, but it fits. Vermont's close enough for Hastings to visit regularly, but far enough from the city that no one would think to look there. And hospices specialize in end-of-life care, which matches what Hastings told you about Victor's condition." "Can you get an address?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I can. The question is whether you want me to, whether knowing where he is helps you or just complicates things further." Elena stared out at the passing trees, thinking about the letter in her purse, about Victor's shaky handwriting and his admission that he didn't know how to love properly. Part of her wanted to see him, wanted to look him in the eye one last time and ask all the questions that had haunted her since the divorce. Why had he married her if he'd already had a child with someone else? Who was Lily's mother? When had he known he was dying? But another part of her knew that seeing Victor now would change nothing, would give her answers that didn't really matter compared to the question of how to help Lily thrive. "Don't look for him," Elena said finally. "If Victor wanted me to know where he was, he would have told me. And whatever time he has left should be his own. I don't need to intrude on it." "That's generous of you." "It's not generosity, it's self-preservation. Seeing him dying would make this about him again, about our failed marriage and all the things we never said to each other. But this isn't about Victor and me anymore. It's about Lily. And I need to keep that clear in my own mind." Marcus nodded, his respect for her decision evident in his expression. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Cedar Ridge looked even more beautiful in the clear autumn light, the gardens ablaze with chrysanthemums and asters, the trees forming a canopy of gold overhead. Elena felt her nervousness spike as they pulled into the parking lot. This visit would set the tone for her relationship with Lily, would determine whether the girl felt safe with her or wary, open, or closed off. Catherine met them in the lobby, her smile warm and genuine. "Ms. Brooks, welcome back. And you must be Mr. Webb. Thank you both for coming." She gestured toward a hallway. "I've arranged for you to meet in our family visiting room. It's quieter than the main areas, more conducive to one-on-one interaction. Lily's speech therapist, Sarah, will bring her down in a few minutes. She'll stay nearby in case Lily needs support, but I think you'll find that Lily's quite good at indicating her needs once she feels comfortable." The family visiting room was designed to feel like someone's living room rather than an institutional space. Soft couches, bookshelves filled with picture books and toys, a window overlooking the garden. Elena sat down, her heart hammering. "Relax," Catherine said gently. "Lily's very perceptive. She picks up on emotions, especially anxiety. If you're nervous, she'll be nervous. Just be yourself. Talk to her like you would any 4-year-old. She may not respond the way a typical child would, but she's listening and processing. Then Sarah arrived with Lily in a specialized stroller that supported her posture. The little girl's eyes swept the room, landing on Catherine first, then Elena. Recognition flickered across her face. "Lily, do you remember Ms. Elena from last week?" Catherine asked. "She came to visit and she really liked you. She wanted to come back and spend some time with you today. Is that okay?" Lily looked at Elena for a long moment, those gray-green eyes studying her with an intensity that felt familiar. Then she smiled, small and tentative, but real. "Hi," Lily said carefully. Elena felt her heart crack open. "Hi, Lily. It's really nice to see you again. I brought you something." She pulled a small wrapped package from her bag, something she'd chosen that morning after an hour of agonizing in a bookstore. "It's a book, one of my favorites when I was little. Would you like to see it?" Lily nodded, her eyes fixed on the package with clear interest. Sarah helped her unwrap it, revealing a cloth book with different textures on each page and simple pictures of animals. "Soft," Lily said, her hand touching the fuzzy fabric that represented a rabbit. "That's right, it's soft. Like the rabbit in the story Miss Sarah was reading to you last time." Elena moved closer, kneeling beside the stroller so she was at Lily's eye level. "Can I read it to you?" Another nod, more confident this time. For the next hour, Elena read and talked and listened to Lily's careful words. She learned that Lily loved music, that she could count to 5 with concentration, that she had strong preferences about which stuffed animals she liked. She learned that Lily's laugh really was infectious, bright, and pure and completely unguarded. And she learned that loving this child wouldn't require effort or obligation. It would happen naturally, inevitably, the way sunrise follows darkness. When it was time to go, Lily reached out and touched Elena's hand. "Come back?" Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I'll come back, I promise." Catherine walked them to the lobby, her expression knowing. "She liked you. That doesn't happen quickly with Lily. You have a gift for this." "I don't know about that," Elena said. "I've never done anything like this before." "Maybe that's why it works. You're not approaching her as a medical case or a problem to solve. You're just getting to know her. That's what she needs most." In the car, Marcus glanced at her. "You okay?" Elena nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. She'd gone to Cedar Ridge expecting to feel burdened by responsibility. Instead, she felt lighter than she had in months, purposeful, like she'd finally found something worth building her life around. Victor had given her many things during their marriage: wealth, status, access to a world she'd never imagined. But this gift, the daughter he'd trusted her to love, was the only one that mattered. "I'm more than okay," Elena said finally. "I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm, a pattern Elena had never anticipated building but found herself grateful for nonetheless. Tuesdays and Fridays became her days at Cedar Ridge, the bookstore manager graciously adjusting her schedule when Elena explained she had family obligations upstate. It wasn't technically a lie. Lily was family now, even if the connection existed only in signed documents and a growing attachment Elena felt deepening with each visit. She brought books, always books. Lily's collection grew to include touch-and-feel stories, simple picture books with bold colors, and one special cloth book with different textures that played music when you pressed certain pages. That one became Lily's favorite, and she would reach for it the moment Elena arrived, her face lighting up with recognition and anticipation. "Miss Elena!" Lily's pronunciation improved each week, the therapist marveling at her progress. "Book! Music book!" And Elena would sit on the floor of the visiting room, Lily transferred from her stroller to a supportive floor seat, and they would read together. Sometimes Catherine would observe from the doorway, smiling at the bond forming between them. Sometimes Sarah would join them, offering gentle corrections when Lily struggled with a word, celebrating her victories with genuine enthusiasm. It was during the 4th week that Elena noticed the man. He was standing in the parking lot when she and Marcus left Cedar Ridge, leaning against a dark SUV, watching the building with the kind of studied casualness that set off every alarm Marcus had spent months training her to recognize. Elena didn't react, didn't look directly at him, just got into the car and waited until they were on the road before speaking. The man by the black SUV, you saw him? I saw him. Marcus's voice was tight, controlled. He's been there the last 2 visits. Different vehicle each time, but same guy. 40s, athletic build, military bearing. He's not trying very hard to hide, which means either he's incompetent or he wants to be noticed. Or he's sending a message. Elena's stomach nodded. That someone knows I'm visiting Lily, that they're watching. Possibly. I ran his plates last week, rental car, paid for with cash, no useful trail. I'm going to have Rebecca dig deeper, see if we can identify him through facial recognition or connections to anyone in Victor's former organization. Elena pulled out her phone, texting Hastings. We have a problem. Someone's watching Cedar Ridge. Need to talk ASAP. The response came before they'd even reached the highway. My office, 1 hour. Hastings' expression was grim when they arrived. Marcus accompanying Elena this time. The lawyer had another man with him, someone Elena hadn't met before. Late 50s, gray hair cut military short, eyes that missed nothing. This is Daniel Cross, Hastings said without preamble. Former FBI, now private security. Victor retained him years ago to handle situations exactly like this. Daniel, tell them what you found. Cross opened a laptop, pulling up a photo of the man from the parking lot. His name is James Reeves, former Marine, served 2 tours in Iraq, received an honorable discharge 8 years ago. Since then, he's worked private security for various clients. Most recently, he was employed by the Castellano family. Elena felt her blood run cold. The Castellanos had been one of Victor's primary rivals, a crime family that controlled territory Victor had coveted. Their conflict had been ongoing for years, never quite erupting into open war, but always simmering beneath the surface. Why is someone connected to the Castellanos watching Cedar Ridge? Elena demanded. That's the question, Cross replied. The Castellanos lost significant ground when Victor dismantled his organization. Power vacuums get filled, and they were positioned to fill it. But there are rumors they're looking for leverage, something they can use to consolidate their position or eliminate any threat Victor might still pose. Victor's dying, Elena said flatly. He's not a threat to anyone anymore. You and I know that. They don't. All they know is that the most powerful man on the East Coast disappeared without explanation, his empire collapsed, and no one has seen or heard from him in months. From their perspective, that either means he's dead, in which case they want confirmation, or he's planning something. Either way, they're looking for answers. Hastings leaned forward. And they may have discovered Lily, or at least discovered that Victor was funding care at a specific facility. They're watching to see who visits, trying to determine if there's a connection worth exploiting. Marcus pulled out his own phone, showing Cross the surveillance photos he'd taken of Reeves. How long before they make a move? Hard to say. Right now, they're in the intelligence gathering phase. They know someone's visiting regularly, but they don't know who Elena is or why she matters. If they start digging into her background, they'll find the marriage to Victor, the divorce, the settlement. That might be enough to convince them she's just an ex-wife with no current connection. Or it might convince them she knows something useful, Elena countered, that Victor trusted her with information or assets they want. That too, Cross admitted, which is why we need to control the narrative before they write their own version. I propose we let Reeves see exactly what we want him to see. What do you mean? Elena asked. Cross smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. We stage a conflict. Make it look like you tried to visit Lily, got turned away because you have no legal standing, threw a fit about how your ex-husband promised you could be involved, but his lawyers are blocking you. We make you look like a scorned ex-wife trying to insert yourself into a situation you have no claim to. Angry, emotional, definitely not someone Victor would trust with actual secrets. You want me to look pathetic. I want you to look irrelevant, Cross corrected. Big difference. Pathetic draws pity, which can create interest. Irrelevant means they write you off as a dead end and move on to more promising leads. Elena looked at Hastings. What do you think? I think Daniel's right. We need to give them a reason to stop watching you in Cedar Ridge. If they believe you're just a bitter ex-wife with no real connection to Victor's affairs, they'll lose interest. But we have to sell it convincingly. And if we don't? If they keep digging regardless? Then we move to contingency planning, Hastings said grimly. We relocate Lily to the backup facility Victor established, give her a new identity, start over. But that's a last resort. The disruption to her routine, her therapy, her relationships with the staff, it could set her back months or even years. We avoid it if at all possible. Elena thought about Lily's smile when she arrived for visits, the way the little girl had started calling her Miss Elena with such careful pride. Thought about the progress she was making, the security she was building in the familiar routine of Cedar Ridge. The idea of uprooting all of that made her chest ache. Fine. We do it your way. What do you need from me? Cross pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Script. Memorize it, make it natural, but hit these key points. You arrive at Cedar Ridge, demand to see Lily, get told by Catherine that she's been instructed to limit your visits. You get upset, make a scene, nothing violent, but loud enough that anyone watching knows you're not welcome. Then you leave, preferably visibly angry. Text messages to friends complaining about the situation. Maybe a phone call to your lawyer demanding he do something. Create a digital trail that supports the narrative. When? Tomorrow. I'll have someone photograph the encounter from multiple angles. Make sure Reeves gets a good view. Then we wait and see if he takes the bait. Elena spent that night rehearsing the script, feeling sick at the idea of performing anger at Cedar Ridge, a place that had become a sanctuary. But Cross was right. If this convinced the Castellanos she was irrelevant, it was worth the temporary discomfort. Marcus drove her upstate the next afternoon, both of them tense with the awareness that this had to look real. Catherine had been briefed by Hastings, knew her role in the scene they were about to play. When Elena walked into the lobby, the director's expression was professionally distant rather than warm. "Miss Brooks, I'm afraid I need to speak with you privately." Catherine's voice carried across the lobby, loud enough for the receptionist to hear, loud enough to ensure word would spread. "My office, please." Elena followed, her heart hammering. Through the window, she could see Reeves in the parking lot, watching. Cross had positioned himself nearby, camera ready. This was it. Catherine closed the office door and immediately dropped the cold expression, her eyes sympathetic. "I hate this," she said quietly. "Lying goes against everything I believe about transparency with families. I know. I'm sorry you have to be part of it, but if it keeps Lily safe, then it's worth it. I understand." Catherine straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Ready?" Elena nodded. Catherine opened the door, her voice rising. "I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks, but I've received instructions from Lily's legal guardian that your visits need to be significantly reduced. Once a month at most, and only with advance approval." "That's ridiculous." Elena let real emotion fuel her response, thinking about what it would actually feel like to be cut off from Lily. "I've been visiting twice a week. Lily knows me. She looks forward to seeing me. You can't just arbitrarily decide, 'It's not my decision.'" Mr. Hastings was very clear. He feels your involvement has been becoming too intense, too personal. Lily is not your child, Ms. Brooks. You have no legal standing, no familial relationship. Your continued presence is actually detrimental to her establishing appropriate attachments with permanent caregivers. The words stung even though Elena knew they were scripted, knew Catherine didn't believe them. "Victor wanted me involved. He specifically asked me to look after her. Victor is not in a position to make those decisions anymore. I'm sorry, but unless you have legal documentation granting you guardianship rights, I can't allow these frequent visits to continue." Elena stood, letting her chair scrape loudly against the floor. "This is unbelievable. I've been nothing but supportive, nothing but helpful, and you're going to cut me off because some lawyer decided I'm too involved? I'm following the instructions of Lily's legal guardian. I don't have a choice." Catherine's tone was firm but not unkind, perfectly calibrated. "I'm sorry. I know you care about her. But this is what's best for Lily." Elena stormed out of the office, past the receptionist whose eyes were wide with surprise, through the lobby and into the parking lot where she knew Reeves was watching. She yanked open the car door, slamming it hard enough to make Marcus wince. "Drive," she said, her voice shaking with real anger now, not at Catherine, but at the whole situation, at the fact that loving a child had become this complicated performance. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot, checking his mirrors. Reeves was still there, phone to his ear, clearly reporting what he'd just witnessed. That was convincing, Marcus said quietly. It didn't feel like acting. Elena stared out the window, fighting unexpected tears. What if Hastings really did decide I was too involved? What if he could actually cut me off from her? He wouldn't. The guardianship papers give you authority. Catherine was following a script, but the real documents say something very different. I know, but for a minute there, it felt real. It felt like losing her. Marcus reached over, squeezing her shoulder briefly. Which is exactly why that performance worked. Reeves saw genuine emotion. He saw a woman who cares about a child but has no real power over the situation. That's the story we need him to believe. Back at her apartment, Elena followed the rest of Cross's script. She texted her lawyer, Daniel Reeves, who played along perfectly, demanding he do something about the ridiculous restrictions Cedar Ridge was imposing. She called a friend from her old life, someone she knew had loose lips and looser loyalty, complaining loudly about how Victor's lawyers were blocking her from visiting the daughter he never bothered to mention while we were married. She created a digital trail of frustration and impotence, a narrative of someone who wanted to be involved but had no actual standing or authority. Then she waited. Cross called 3 days later. Reeves is gone, stopped surveillance completely. I had someone follow him back to the city. He reported to a Castellano lieutenant, showed them photos, and what I assume was his assessment. They're not interested in you anymore. Elena felt relief wash over her like a wave. How can you be sure? Because I have sources inside their organization. Word is they've concluded you're exactly what you appeared to be. An ex-wife with no current value, no leverage, no useful information. They're moving on to other leads. Which means I can go back to visiting Lily normally. Give it 2 weeks. Let the story settle. Then yes, resume your regular schedule. Catherine will explain to the staff that the guardianship situation was clarified, that you do have authority after all. It'll look like a bureaucratic mix-up got resolved. After he hung up, Elena sat in the gathering darkness of her apartment, feeling the weight of the last few days settle over her. This was her life now. Not the simple existence she'd imagined when she divorced Victor, but something far more complex. She was protecting a child from threats that originated in a world she'd tried to escape, using skills she'd learned as a Mafia wife to shield an innocent girl from the consequences of her father's choices. It was exhausting, it was terrifying, and it was the most meaningful thing Elena had ever done. The burner phone rang, and Elena answered without hesitation. She'd been expecting this call. Hastings told me what happened. Victor's voice was weaker than the last time, the words slightly slurred. The tumor was progressing. That you put yourself at risk created a scene to protect her. It worked. The Castellanos have moved on. For now. But Elena, you need to understand there will always be another threat. Someone else looking for leverage, looking for weakness. Lily will never be completely safe as long as people know she exists. Then we make sure no one knows. We protect the secret, we stay vigilant, we do whatever it takes. Elena's voice was firm. I'm not walking away from her, Victor. Not because you're paying me, not because of some legal obligation. Because she matters. Because she deserves someone to fight for her. Victor was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I don't deserve your kindness. Don't deserve the gift you're giving her by being in her life. You're right, you don't. But this isn't about you anymore. It's about Lily. It's about making sure one good thing survives all the damage you did building and destroying your empire. She is the one good thing, Victor said softly. The only thing I ever created that wasn't tainted by violence or greed. Her mother... He broke off, coughing. Elena waited, holding her breath. Victor had never mentioned Lily's mother, never explained that part of the story. Her mother was a good person, Victor continued finally. Someone who deserved better than me. We weren't in love, weren't even really together. It was one night, a mistake that became a blessing I didn't know how to accept. When she got pregnant, I offered her everything, money, protection, a life where she'd want for nothing. But she wanted nothing to do with my world, said she'd raise the baby alone, far away from the violence. What happened? Complications during labor, placental abruption. They saved Lily, but Alexandra... His voice broke. She died before she could even hold her daughter. Before I could tell her I was sorry for offering money, when what she'd needed was for me to be a different kind of man. Elena felt tears sliding down her face, mourning a woman she'd never known, who'd died giving life to a child whose father had been incapable of truly loving either of them the way they deserved. So I took Lily, Victor continued, set up the trust, the guardianship, made sure she'd have the best care. But I couldn't claim her publicly, couldn't make her a target, and I couldn't be the father she needed because I didn't know how to be anything except what I was, a man who controlled everything and understood nothing. You loved her enough to protect her. That counts for something. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, dying alone in a facility where no one knows my real name, it feels like love without wisdom is just another form of damage. Victor coughed again, longer this time. I need to go. The pain gets bad when I talk too long, but Elena, thank you for seeing past my failures, for loving my daughter better than I ever could. The line went dead. Elena sat in the darkness, the phone in her lap, crying for Victor and Alexandra and Lily and the terrible mathematics of a love story that had produced one beautiful child and so much collateral damage. She cried for the man Victor might have been if he'd made different choices, for the woman who'd died, never knowing her daughter would be cared for the little girl who would grow up never fully understanding the sacrifices made to keep her safe. When the tears finally stopped, Elena felt something shift inside her. She'd been approaching Lily's guardianship as a responsibility, a duty she'd accepted because it was right. But Victor's confession had reframed everything. Lily wasn't just a child who needed protection. She was the living legacy of a love that had been too brief and a man who'd learned too late that control wasn't the same as care. And Elena had the chance to give Lily something neither of her biological parents had been able to provide. A love that wasn't complicated by guilt or obligation or the weight of impossible circumstances. She could simply be present, consistent, someone Lily could count on. The 2 weeks crawled by. Elena worked at the bookstore, maintained her routines, pretended everything was normal while anxiety gnawed at her insides. What if the Castellanos hadn't really lost interest? What if this was just a pause before they came back with more dangerous questions? But when the 2 weeks ended and Marcus drove her back to Cedar Ridge, there was no sign of Reeves or anyone else watching. The parking lot held the usual vehicles, staff cars, a few family members visiting their children, nothing suspicious. Catherine greeted Elena at the door with a genuine smile this time, no performance required. Welcome back. Lily's been asking about you. Well, asking in her way. Lots of Miss Elena, and looking hopefully at the door during your usual visiting times. She noticed I was gone? Oh yes. Children like Lily may process relationships differently, but they absolutely form attachments. She missed you. Catherine led her to the visiting room. I'll go get her. When Lily arrived, wheeled in by Sarah, her face lit up with such pure joy that Elena felt her heart crack open all over again. Miss Elena, you came back. Of course I came back, sweetheart. I promised I would, didn't I? Elena knelt beside the stroller, taking Lily's small hand in hers. I'm sorry I was gone. Something came up that I had to take care of. But I'm here now. And I brought you a new book. She'd chosen carefully this time. A story about a little girl who was different from other children, but who found people who loved her exactly as she was. It wasn't subtle, but Lily was 4 years old and wouldn't pick up on the metaphor anyway. What mattered was the message. Being different didn't mean being less, and the right people would see your worth regardless. They read together, Lily's small voice carefully pronouncing the words she knew, Elena filling in the rest. And when they reached the end, when the story's little girl found her happy ending, Lily looked up at Elena with those gray-green eyes that were so heartbreakingly familiar. Love you, Lily said simply. Elena felt the words hit her like a physical blow. She'd been told that children with Lily's level of cognitive impairment often struggled with abstract concepts like love, that they might feel attachment without being able to name it or express it verbally. But here was Lily, offering those 3 words with complete sincerity and trust. I love you too, sweetheart, Elena whispered, pulling Lily into a careful hug that respected the girl's physical limitations but conveyed everything Elena felt. So much. When she left Cedar Ridge that afternoon, Elena felt something settle into place that she hadn't even realized was missing. This wasn't obligation anymore. It wasn't responsibility or duty or paying a debt to Victor. This was family, chosen, unconventional, legally invisible, but emotionally real. Lily was hers to protect, to nurture, to love. Not because Victor had asked it of her, but because the little girl had claimed a piece of her heart and Elena had no desire to take it back. Marcus noticed the change during the drive home. "You look different, lighter somehow." "I feel different. Lily told me she loves me." "That's huge. Catherine said she doesn't express emotions verbally very often." "I know, which makes it even more meaningful." Elena stared out the window at the landscape rolling past. "I spent so much of my marriage to Victor feeling like I didn't matter, like I was just decorative, replaceable, not essential to anyone's life. But Lily needs me. Not my money or my connections or what I can do for her, just me. Being present, showing up, loving her." "That's all any kid really needs," Marcus said quietly. "Someone who shows up, someone who stays." Elena thought about Victor dying alone in a hospice, about Alexandra dying in a delivery room, about all the ways Lily had been failed by circumstance in biology. But she also thought about the team surrounding the little girl now, Catherine and Sarah and the other therapists, Hastings ensuring her legal protections held, Marcus keeping watch for threats, Rebecca monitoring the financial structures that would support Lily for life. And Elena herself, the guardian who'd walked into this role expecting burden, but finding purpose instead. "I'm going to call Hastings," Elena said suddenly. "Tell him I want to adjust my visiting schedule, 3 times a week instead of 2. And I want to start attending Lily's therapy sessions, learning the exercises so I can reinforce them during our visits. I want to be more than just someone who reads her stories. I want to be actually useful." He'll probably tell you that reading stories is useful. It is, but I can do more. I should do more. If I'm going to be her guardian, I need to really understand her needs and how to support them. Marcus smiled. Victor chose well. Even if he couldn't be the father Lily needed, he found her the next best thing. Elena pulled out her phone, but before she could call Hastings, it rang with an unknown number. Her stomach tightened. Unknown numbers had stopped being innocent months ago. "Hello? Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Mountain View Hospice in Vermont. I'm calling about Victor Hale." Elena's world stopped. "Is he? He's alive, but his condition has deteriorated significantly in the last 48 hours. He's been asking for you. I know this is irregular, but he's been quite insistent. And given his prognosis, I wanted to reach out. If you're willing to visit, it should be soon. He doesn't have much time left." Elena looked at Marcus, who was already pulling the car over, reading her expression. "I'll come. Text me the address. I'll be there as soon as I can." After she hung up, Elena sat in silence, processing. Victor was dying. Really dying now, days or hours away from the end. And he wanted to see her, wanted to say goodbye or confess something, or simply have someone familiar at his bedside when the end came. "You don't have to go," Marcus said gently. "You don't owe him deathbed comfort." "I know, but I need to. Not for him, for me. So I can close this chapter completely, so I can move forward with Lily without wondering what Victor wanted to say at the end." Marcus nodded and pulled back onto the road, heading north instead of south, toward Vermont instead of the city, toward the man who'd been both the worst thing and indirectly the best thing that had ever happened to Elena. Toward the final conversation with Victor Hale, the Ghost King who'd ruled an empire and lost everything except the one thing that mattered, his daughter. Their daughter now, in all the ways that counted. Elena texted Hastings during the drive. "Victor's dying, going to see him. We'll call when I know more." The response came immediately. "Be careful. And remember, you don't owe him forgiveness, only truth." Truth. Elena turned the word over in her mind as the miles passed. What was the truth about Victor Hale? That he'd been a monster who built an empire on blood? That he'd been a broken man who didn't know how to love without controlling? That he'd been a father who protected his daughter the only way he knew how, even if it meant destroying everything else? All of it, Elena thought. The truth was all of it, contradictory and complicated and impossible to reduce to simple judgment. and in a few hours she would sit beside his deathbed and decide what final words they needed to say to each other before the silence became permanent. The Mountain View Hospice appeared against a backdrop of autumn color, a peaceful facility that looked more like a retreat center than a place people came to die. Elena and Marcus were escorted to a private room by Dr. Chen, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the gentle efficiency of someone who'd helped hundreds of people cross the threshold between life and death. "He's in and out of consciousness," Dr. Chen explained quietly. "The tumor is pressing on areas of his brain that control speech and cognition. He may not make complete sense, may not remember who you are, but he's been saying your name for 2 days, so some part of him knows he wants you here." The room was dimmed, medical equipment beeping softly. And there, in the bed, was Victor Hale, or what remained of him. He'd lost so much weight that his face looked skeletal, his skin gray, his breathing labored. Nothing remained of the powerful man who'd commanded rooms with his presence. Elena approached the bed slowly, sitting in the chair beside it. She took his hand, and his eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. "Elena," he breathed, and even through the pain and medication she heard relief in his voice. "You came." "I came. I'm here, Victor." His grip tightened weakly on her hand. "Lily. Tell me about Lily." And Elena understood. This was why he'd asked for her, not to apologize, not to confess, not to seek forgiveness, but to hear about his daughter one last time, to know she was cared for before the darkness claimed him. So Elena told him about Lily's progress with speech therapy, about the books they read together, about the little girl's infectious laugh and serious eyes. She told him about the new words Lily was learning, the connection she was making, the joy she brought to everyone around her. And as she spoke, Victor's breathing steadied, his expression softening into something that looked almost like peace. "She said she loves me," Elena finished quietly. "Today. She looked at me and said, 'Love you,' like it was the simplest, most natural thing in the world." Victor's eyes closed, tears sliding down his wasted cheeks. "Good," he whispered. "That's good. She deserves love. Deserves someone who stays. I'm staying, Victor. I promise. I'll be there for her, always." His grip on her hand loosened, his breathing growing shallower. "Thank you. For all of it. For being better than I deserved. For loving my daughter when I couldn't figure out how." Elena squeezed his hand, tears falling freely now. "You did figure it out. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not in time, but you figured it out enough to give her a chance. That counts." Victor smiled, small and sad. "Tell her," he coughed, struggling. "Tell her I tried. When she's old enough to understand. Tell her I loved her enough to disappear so she could be safe." "I will. I promise." His eyes closed, his breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of sleep or something beyond sleep. Dr. Chen appeared at Elena's shoulder, checking monitors, her expression professionally sympathetic. "It could be hours or days," she said quietly, "but this is likely the last lucid conversation you'll have with him. The tumor is affecting more and more of his brain function." Elena sat with Victor for another hour, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. And when she finally stood to leave, she leaned down and whispered in his ear, "You're forgiven, Victor, not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would poison the love I'm building with Lily. So I forgive you, I release you, and I hope you find peace on the other side of this." She kissed his forehead gently, then walked out of the room without looking back. In the car, Marcus asked no questions, just drove in silence while Elena processed everything she'd felt in that room. Grief for the man Victor might have been, relief that his suffering would end soon, and a strange, unexpected gratitude that he'd trusted her with his daughter's future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hastings. "Dr. Chen called, said you handled that with remarkable grace. Victor is lucky to have known you, even if he didn't appreciate it at the time." Elena didn't respond. She just stared out the window at the darkening landscape, thinking about beginnings and endings, about the strange ways love could survive even the worst circumstances, about a little girl who would never know her father, but who would be loved fiercely by the woman he'd chosen to protect her. The Ghost King was dying, but his legacy, Not the empire, not the violence, but the daughter who carried his eyes and his resilience would live on. And Elena would make sure that legacy was defined not by Victor's failures, but by Lily's triumphs, by every word she learned to say, by every smile she shared, by the proof that even from broken beginnings, something beautiful could grow. Victor Hale died 3 days later, alone, except for the hospice staff who'd cared for him in those final weeks. Dr. Chen called Elena at dawn, her voice gentle with the practiced sympathy of someone who delivered this news too often. He went peacefully. No pain at the end, just a slow fade. He spoke your name once more yesterday, and Lily's. I thought you should know. Elena thanked her and hung up, sitting in the gray morning light of her apartment, feeling the finality settle over her like snow. The Ghost King was truly gone now, his empire dismantled, his secrets buried with him except for the ones Elena carried forward. She should have felt relief or closure or some clear emotion that marked the end of this chapter. Instead, she felt the weight of responsibility multiply. Victor's death meant Lily was truly orphaned now, both parents gone, no one left who shared her blood except distant relatives who'd never known she existed. Elena was all the little girl had, and that reality was both terrifying and strangely clarifying. She called Hastings, who answered immediately despite the early hour. I heard. Dr. Chen contacted me as well. There are arrangements to be made, but nothing that requires your immediate attention. Victor left very specific instructions about his burial. Private, anonymous, no ceremony. He'll be cremated under the name he used at the hospice, with no obituary, no public acknowledgement. He wanted to disappear completely. What about his assets? The remaining accounts, the properties that haven't been sold? All flowing into trusts as planned. The bulk goes to Lily's care fund, ensuring she'll have resources for life. A smaller trust is designated for you, both as compensation for guardianship and to ensure you have means to protect her if threats emerge. And there's one final bequest that Victor wanted delivered after his death. Elena felt her stomach tighten. What kind of bequest? A letter. He wrote it 2 weeks ago during one of his last lucid periods. I'll have it couriered to you this afternoon. Beyond that, the estate is settled. Victor planned meticulously. There should be no complications, no loose ends that could expose Lily's connection to him. After they hung up, Elena showered and dressed mechanically, going through the motions while her mind processed the new reality. She was a single woman in her late 20s, working at a bookstore, living in a modest apartment, serving as secret guardian to a special needs child whose father had been a crime boss. Her life had become something she could never have imagined 3 years ago when she'd married Victor, believing in fairy tales and redemption. The letter arrived at 3 o'clock, delivered by courier in a sealed envelope with her name written in Victor's increasingly shaky handwriting. Elena made herself coffee, settled into her favorite chair by the window, and opened it with hands that trembled slightly. The letter was longer than the previous one, written over multiple sessions, judging by the varying steadiness of the script. In some paragraphs, the letters were clear and controlled. In others, they wavered across the page like a recording of his deterioration. Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The world is lighter for my absence, though it won't know it. I spent my life believing power mattered, that control was the same as strength, that forcing the world to bend to my will would somehow fill the emptiness inside me. I was wrong about all of it. The only power that matters is the power to protect what you love without destroying it in the process. I learned that too late to save my marriage to you, too late to be the father Lily needed, too late for anything except ensuring you'd have the resources to do better than I ever could. This letter is my final confession and my final request. The confession. I knew I was dying before I married you. The headaches had started, the symptoms were there, but I ignored them because acknowledging mortality meant acknowledging I'd wasted my life building something hollow. I married you thinking maybe having a wife, creating the appearance of normalcy, would make me feel human again. That was unfair to you. Cruel, actually. You deserved a husband who loved you freely, not a dying man trying to purchase redemption through the illusion of domesticity. I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than I know how to express. Lily was born 6 months into our marriage. Her mother, Alexandra, was someone I'd known briefly before we met. One night, one moment of human connection in a life full of transactions. When she told me she was pregnant, I offered money. She wanted nothing to do with me or my world, said she'd raise the baby alone, far from the violence. I respected that. Maybe the only time in my life I actually respected someone's choice instead of trying to override it. But when Alexandra died and Lily survived, damaged but alive, I couldn't walk away. Couldn't let her grow up in the system or with strangers who didn't understand what she'd cost her mother. So I claimed her privately, set up the trust, made sure she'd have everything she needed, and I kept her secret from you, from everyone, because in my world, children are weapons used against their parents. I couldn't risk her safety for the sake of honesty in our marriage. I know that was wrong. No, I should have trusted you with the truth. But I was a coward who chose control over vulnerability every single time. The final request. When Lily is old enough to understand, tell her about Alexandra. Tell her that her mother was brave and kind and deserved better than me. Tell her that Alexandra chose to bring her into the world even though pregnancy was risky, even though doctors warned her because she believed every life mattered regardless of limitation. Tell her that love, real love, is about sacrifice and choice, and seeing someone's worth beyond what they can do for you. Don't tell her about me. Don't explain my world or my crimes or the empire I built. Let her think her father was simply someone who couldn't be present, but who made sure she was cared for. Let me be a blank space in her history rather than a stain. That's the last thing I ask of you, Elena. Let me disappear from her story so completely that she never has to carry the weight of being Victor Hale's daughter. Let her just be Lily, a girl who is loved and supported and given every chance to thrive within her limitations. Make her story about who she becomes, not who I was. Thank you for giving me peace at the end. Thank you for being exactly who I needed you to be when I'd done nothing to deserve it. Thank you for loving my daughter when I couldn't figure out how to love anyone without destroying them. You were the best thing I ever had, and letting you go was the first truly selfless thing I ever did. I hope someday you can remember me without anger. Remember the man who could have been instead of the man who was. But if you can't, I understand that too. Some damage runs too deep for forgiveness. Either way, take care of our girl. Give her the childhood I robbed you of by bringing you into my world. And when she asks about her father someday, tell her he tried. In the end, imperfectly and too late, he tried to do right by her. That's the only legacy that matters. Goodbye, Elena. Thank you for everything. Victor. Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face for the man Victor had been underneath the armor, for Alexandra who died giving Lily life, for the little girl who would grow up never knowing either of her biological parents. The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm her. That Victor had known he was dying when they married, that he'd kept Lily's secret through their entire relationship, that even his final act of trust came wrapped in deception. But underneath the anger and grief, Elena found something unexpected: understanding. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that Victor had been as broken by his life as anyone he'd hurt with it, that his failures had come from the same place as his final redemption, a desperate need to control outcomes in a world that didn't bend to will alone. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the envelope with the first one he'd written, locking them both in the small safe where she kept the USB drive and the guardianship papers. Someday, maybe, she'd share them with Lily if the girl asked about her father. But Victor was right. Lily's story should be about who she became, not who she'd come from. Elena pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. "Victor's gone. I'm okay. Going to visit Lily tomorrow. Want to come?" His response was immediate. "Of course, pick you up at 8. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Victor had asked of her, to raise Lily without the shadow of his past, to let the little girl define herself by possibility rather than limitation. It was a beautiful goal, but Elena wasn't sure how to achieve it while also protecting her from threats that originated in Victor's world. The answer came to her around 3 in the morning, clarity emerging from exhaustion. She couldn't hide Lily from every potential danger. What she could do was build a life for the girl so full of love and support and opportunity that any threat would have to go through an army of people who cared about her first. Not hired security or paid protection, but genuine human connections. She called an emergency meeting of her team for the next morning. Marcus, Rebecca, Tom, and Hastings joining via video call. When everyone was assembled, Elena laid out her plan. Victor's dead. His empire is gone. The immediate threats have been neutralized. But I'm not naive enough to think we're safe forever. Someone could still connect Lily to Victor someday. Could try to use her as leverage or revenge, or just because they can. So we need to build protection that doesn't depend on secrecy alone. What are you proposing? Hastings asked. We integrate Lily into the community. We make her visible as a child who needs care, but invisible as Victor Hale's daughter. We encourage Cedar Ridge to increase their community outreach, bring in volunteers, create a network of people who know Lily and care about her welfare. We make sure her therapists, her teachers, the facility staff, everyone becomes invested in her success. So if anyone ever does threaten her, they're not just threatening one hidden child. They're threatening a whole community's beloved member. Rebecca caught on immediately. You want to hide her in plain sight, make her so integrated into the Cedar Ridge community that extracting her would be noticed and fought by dozens of people who have no connection to Victor's world. Exactly. Right now she's isolated. Protected, yes, but isolated. That makes her vulnerable in a different way. If we can surround her with genuine relationships, people who advocate for her because they know and love her, not because they're paid to, then she becomes much harder to threaten. Tom nodded slowly. It's counterintuitive, but it could work. Most criminals operate in shadows. They don't want attention, don't want complications. A child who's surrounded by community involvement becomes a complicated target. There's risk, Marcus pointed out. More people knowing her means more potential for someone to notice the resemblance to Victor, to start asking questions. Victor's dead, Elena said firmly. No one's looking for connections to a ghost, and Lily's 4 years old with significant disabilities. Even if someone noticed she had similar eyes, so what? Thousands of people have gray-green eyes. Without DNA evidence or documented connection, it's just coincidence. Hastings was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. I think it's brilliant, actually. Victor spent his life hiding her, which made sense when he was alive and his enemies could use her against him. But now that he's gone, the best protection is exactly what you're describing: integration, visibility, community. I'll support this approach. They spent the next 2 hours planning the details. Rebecca would research community volunteer programs that might benefit Cedar Ridge. Tom would use his journalism contacts to write a feel-good piece about the facility, highlighting their excellent care and community involvement without mentioning any specific children. Marcus would continue security monitoring but focus on detecting pattern threats rather than individual visitors. And Elena would do what she'd been doing, showing up, being present, loving Lily openly and consistently until the little girl was so firmly embedded in her life that separating them would be unthinkable. The next morning, driving to Cedar Ridge with Marcus, Elena felt lighter than she had in months. Victor's death had closed a chapter, and this new approach felt like the right way to begin the next one. Catherine met her at the door with a sympathetic expression. Hastings called, told me about Victor. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Elena appreciated that Catherine didn't pry, didn't ask questions about a relationship she couldn't fully understand. Lily's in the sensory garden. We've been working on outdoor time, helping her tolerate different textures and sounds. She's been asking for you all morning. The sensory garden was a beautiful space filled with plants chosen for their varied textures and scents, with wind chimes and water features providing auditory stimulation. Lily sat in her adaptive wheelchair near a fountain, her small hand trailing in the water while Sarah supervised nearby. Miss Elena, Lily's face transformed when she saw her, pure joy radiating from her expression. Elena knelt beside the wheelchair, taking Lily's wet hand in hers. Hi, sweetheart. I heard you've been playing in the water. Wet, Lily said seriously, holding up her dripping fingers. Cold. It is cold, isn't it? Do you like it? Lily nodded enthusiastically. Like it. Like you. Elena felt her heart swell. I like you too, Lily. So much. They spent the afternoon in the garden, Elena learning from Sarah how to encourage Lily to explore different sensory experiences, how to recognize when stimulation became overwhelming, how to support the girl's development through play. It was harder than Elena had expected, requiring constant attention to Lily's nonverbal cues, but also more rewarding than she'd imagined. By the time they went inside for Lily's afternoon therapy session, Elena had decided she was ready for the next step. She pulled Catherine aside while Sarah helped Lily transition. I want to be more involved in Lily's care. Not just visiting, but actually participating in her therapy sessions, learning her exercise routines, understanding her medical needs. I know I'm not listed as her parent or legal guardian on the public documents, but Hastings has arranged for me to have decision-making authority. I want to use that authority to be genuinely useful. Catherine's expression softened. I was hoping you'd say that. Lily's made remarkable progress since you started visiting regularly. Having someone who's consistently present, who she can count on, makes a tremendous difference. I'll talk to our therapy director about getting you more involved. It'll require some training, some observation, but I think you're ready for it. Over the following weeks, Elena threw herself into learning everything she could about Lily's care. She attended physical therapy sessions, watching how the therapist stretched Lily's tight muscles, how they encouraged her to bear weight on her legs with the help of supportive equipment. She sat in on speech therapy, learning the techniques Sarah used to help Lily form words, the picture cards that helped her communicate when words failed. She met with Lily's doctors, asked endless questions about cerebral palsy, about the specific ways Lily's brain damage manifested, about realistic goals for her development. She learned that Lily would likely never walk independently, but with the right support and equipment, she might stand and take steps. That her speech would always be limited, but augmentative communication devices could expand her ability to express herself. That her cognitive impairment meant academics would be challenging, but that didn't mean she couldn't learn or grow or have rich experiences. Most importantly, Elena learned to see past the disability to the child underneath. Lily loved music, especially classical piano pieces. She had definite preferences about food, people, activities. She could be stubborn when she didn't want to do therapy exercises, but would try almost anything if you framed it as a game. She had a wicked sense of humor for a 4-year-old, laughing at silly faces and unexpected sounds. She was, Elena realized, exactly like any other child in all the ways that truly mattered. Her needs were just more complex, her timeline different, her victories measured in smaller increments. But her capacity for joy, for connection, for love, that was universal. 3 months after Victor's death, Catherine approached Elena with a proposal. We're launching a volunteer mentor program, pairing community members with our children for regular visits and activities. I was wondering if you'd be interested in being Lily's official mentor. It would formalize your role, give you access to more resources and training, and help us expand the program to other children by using you as a model. Elena didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely yes. The paperwork was simple, establishing Elena as a community volunteer mentor with no mention of guardianship or legal authority. To the outside world, she was just a kind woman who'd taken an interest in a special needs child and committed to being consistently present in her life. The reality was far more complex, but that was fine. Lily didn't need the world to know she was Victor Hale's daughter. She needed stability, love, and people who fought for her future. Elena could provide all of that without any official titles. The Volunteer Mentor program launched 2 months later with a small ceremony at Cedar Ridge celebrating the community members who'd signed up. Tom Pierce wrote a beautiful article about it for a regional magazine, highlighting the importance of consistent relationships for medically fragile children without naming any specific kids. The piece generated enough interest that 3 more volunteers signed up, each paired with children who needed additional support. Elena watched other mentors beginning their relationships with their assigned children and felt a fierce protectiveness for what she and Lily had built. These volunteers were generous, committed people, but they were starting fresh. She and Lily had history now, inside jokes, shared experiences, a bond that had been forged through months of showing up even when it was hard. You did this, Catherine said, standing beside Elena at the ceremony. You sparked this whole program just by being consistently present for Lily. Other people saw what a difference it made and wanted to replicate it. I didn't do it to start a program. I did it because she needed me. I know. That's what makes it authentic, and authenticity is what other people respond to. Catherine paused. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. What made you choose Lily? Of all the children you could have gotten involved with, what drew you to her specifically? Elena thought about Victor's eyes staring out from Lily's small face, about the letter asking her to let him disappear from his daughter's story, about the strange path that had led from a failed marriage to this moment. I saw her and knew she needed someone to fight for her. That's all. Sometimes the reasons we love people aren't complicated. Sometimes you just know. Catherine smiled. Well, however it happened, I'm grateful. Lily's thriving in ways I wasn't sure were possible when she first came to us. You've made a real difference in her life. As the ceremony wrapped up and families began to leave, Elena returned to the visiting room where Lily was waiting with Sarah. The little girl had been part of the ceremony briefly, sitting in her wheelchair on stage while Catherine explained the mentor program, but had tired quickly and been brought back to familiar space. Miss Elena! Lily's greeting never got old, never failed to make Elena smile. Hi, sweetheart. Did you have fun at the ceremony? Lily wrinkled her nose. Loud. Too many people. Elena laughed. I know, it was pretty overwhelming. Want to read a story instead? Just you and me? Yes! Rabbit book. They settled into their usual routine, Elena reading while Lily touched the textures and occasionally contributed a word she recognized. But halfway through the story, Lily looked up at Elena with an expression that seemed older than her years. You stay? The question was simple but loaded with weight. You stay with me? Elena set down the book, taking Lily's small hands in hers. Yes, baby, I stay. I'll always stay. I promise. Like Sarah? Like Miss Kathy? Even more than that. Sarah and Miss Kathy take care of lots of kids. But I'm here just for you. You're special to me, Lily. You're my girl. Lily processed this seriously, then nodded as if confirming something she'd suspected. My Elena. That's right. I'm your Elena, and you're my Lily. We're family. The word felt right in a way Elena hadn't expected. Family had meant her parents who'd passed away before she met Victor, had meant a husband who'd lied to her, had meant obligation and disappointment and things that broke under pressure. But this chosen relationship with a child who had every reason to distrust adults, who'd lost both biological parents before she could remember them, this was family in its purest form. Over the next year, Elena and Lily's relationship deepened and evolved. Lily's 5th birthday was celebrated with a small party at Cedar Ridge, attended by staff and the other volunteer mentors who'd become friends through the program. Elena brought a special cake and a gift she'd agonized over, an adaptive musical keyboard that Lily could play with minimal finger movement, programmed with her favorite classical pieces. The joy on Lily's face when she pressed the keys and heard Mozart pour out was worth every penny. She spent the entire party making music, her serious expression transforming into wonder every time a new sound emerged. You know her so well, one of the other mentors commented, watching Lily play. How she thinks, what makes her happy. It's like you're attuned to her wavelength. I've had practice, Elena said simply, and I pay attention. That's really all it takes, paying attention and showing up. But it was more than that, and Elena knew it. She'd built her life around Lily in ways both small and large. She'd moved to a bigger apartment closer to the highway that led upstate, cutting her commute to Cedar Ridge. She'd reduced her hours at the bookstore to part-time, using the allowance from Victor's trust to cover her expenses so she could spend more time with Lily. She'd taken courses in special education and pediatric therapy, wanting to better understand the science behind Lily's treatment. She'd become, in every way except biologically, Lily's mother. The realization hit her one afternoon when Lily had a particularly difficult therapy session. The little girl was exhausted, frustrated by exercises that felt impossible, tears streaming down her face as she tried and failed to accomplish a movement her therapist was encouraging. I can't, Lily sobbed. Too hard. Can't do it. Elena knelt beside her, wiping away tears. I know it's hard, baby. I know it feels impossible right now, but you're so strong, Lily. Stronger than you know. And I'm right here with you. We'll figure it out together, okay? You don't have to do this alone. Lily threw her small arms around Elena's neck, clinging tight. Love you, Mama. The word stopped Elena's heart. Mama. Lily had never called her that before, had always used Miss Elena, or just Elena. But in this moment of vulnerability and trust, the title had emerged naturally. Sarah, the therapist, caught Elena's eye and smiled gently. She's been working up to that for weeks. asking me if it was okay to call you Mama. I told her it was whatever felt right to her. Elena held Lily close, tears streaming down her own face now. It's perfect, sweetheart. You can call me whatever you want. Mama is perfect. From that day forward, Elena was Mama. Not in the legal documents, not in any official capacity, but in the relationship that mattered most. The one she and Lily had built together through consistency, love, and the choice to keep showing up even when it was hard. When Lily turned 6, Catherine called Elena with unexpected news. We've been approached by a documentary filmmaker who wants to do a piece on Cedar Ridge and our mentor program. They want to feature several of our children and their mentors, show the impact of consistent community involvement. I thought of you and Lily immediately, but I wanted to check with you first. I know you value privacy. Elena's first instinct was to refuse. Exposure meant risk, meant potentially drawing attention that could connect Lily to Victor. But then she thought about what she'd learned in the 2 years since Victor's death, that hiding created its own vulnerabilities, that the best protection was often visibility and community. What would it involve? A day of filming here at the facility, interviews with you and Lily, footage of you participating in therapy sessions or doing activities together. They'd want to hear your story, why you got involved, what you've learned, how Lily has impacted your life. It would air on a major network, reach millions of people. Can I think about it? Of course, take a week. Talk to whoever you need to consult with. This is a big decision. Elena called an emergency meeting with Marcus, Rebecca, Hastings, and Tom. She laid out the opportunity and her concerns, then waited for their input. Marcus spoke first. From a security standpoint, it's risky. Puts Lily on television, makes her recognizable. If anyone from Victor's old world is still paying attention, still looking for connections, this could trigger investigation. Victor's been dead for 2 years, Rebecca countered. His organization is completely dissolved. The people who knew him have moved on to other power structures. I don't think anyone's still looking for leverage from a dead man. Tom had a different perspective. This could actually be protective. You tell a compelling story about a woman who volunteers with a special needs child, millions of people see it, Lily becomes a sympathetic figure. If anyone ever did try to threaten her, the public attention would make it exponentially more difficult. You can't quietly disappear someone who's been on national television. Hastings was characteristically thoughtful. The question is whether the benefit of increased community protection outweighs the risk of exposure. I don't have a clear answer. This is a judgment call that ultimately falls to you, Elena. You're Lily's guardian. What does your instinct tell you? Elena thought about Lily's smile, about the progress she'd made, about the life they'd built together. She thought about Victor's letter asking her to let him disappear from Lily's story, to make her narrative about who she was becoming rather than who she'd come from. We do it, Elena decided. We tell our story, Lily's story, not Victor's. We show people what's possible when you commit to loving someone without reservation, when you choose to see potential instead of limitation. And if it draws attention, if someone starts asking questions, we deal with it then. But I won't hide her anymore. She deserves to be seen. The filming took place on a beautiful spring morning, the gardens at Cedar Ridge in full bloom. The documentary crew was small and professional, immediately putting both Elena and Lily at ease. They filmed a therapy session, capturing Lily's concentration as she worked on standing exercises with Elena's support. They filmed story time in the visiting room, Lily's careful words as she read familiar parts of her favorite book. They filmed them in the garden, Elena pushing Lily's wheelchair along paths lined with flowers while they sang silly songs together. And they filmed interviews, Elena speaking honestly about how she'd come to volunteer at Cedar Ridge, how Lily had changed her understanding of what mattered in life, how love didn't require biological connection to be real and transformative. Tell me about the first time you met Lily, the interviewer prompted. Elena smiled, remembering. I saw this serious little girl reading a book about rabbits, and she had these incredibly wise eyes. Like she'd already figured out something about life that most adults never learn. I knew immediately that I wanted to know her, wanted to be part of her world. What has she taught you? The joy doesn't depend on circumstances. The progress is measured in moments, not milestones. That showing up is sometimes the most radical act of love there is. Elena looked at Lily, who was listening with the intensity that meant she was processing even if she couldn't articulate understanding. She's taught me that family is something you build, not something you're born into, and that the truest version of yourself emerges when you love someone without expecting anything in return. The documentary aired 3 months later, part of a series about community volunteers making a difference. Elena watched it at home with Marcus, nervous about how they'd been portrayed, how Lily would come across, whether she'd made the right decision. But the finished piece was beautiful. It showed Lily as a whole person, not just a medical case. Showed her personality, her humor, her determination. It showed Elena's genuine love without making it saccharine or performative. And it ended with footage of them in the garden, Lily's laugh ringing out as Elena made a silly face, the pure joy of their connection radiating through the screen. Within days, Cedar Ridge was flooded with calls from potential volunteers, from families wanting to support the facility, from people inspired by the story of what could happen when someone chose to show up for a vulnerable child. The mentor program expanded dramatically, and Catherine hired additional staff to coordinate the influx of community involvement. "You've changed everything," Catherine told Elena during one of her visits, "not just for Lily, but for our entire facility. The visibility, the support, the volunteers, it's transforming what we can offer all our children." But the most important change was invisible to everyone except Elena. Lily's confidence had grown exponentially. Being featured in this documentary, being seen and celebrated for who she was, had given her a sense of value that all the therapy in the world couldn't replicate. "I'm famous," Lily announced seriously during one of their reading sessions. "Like a princess." "You are kind of like a princess," Elena agreed, smiling. "But you know what? You were special before the documentary too. You don't need to be on TV to matter." "I know," Lily said, with the confidence of a child who'd been told she was loved often enough to believe it. "I'm special because I'm me, and because you're my mama." "That's exactly right, sweetheart." The years that followed fell into a rhythm that felt less like obligation and more like the natural flow of family life. Elena attended Lily's therapy sessions, celebrated her victories, comforted her through setbacks. She advocated fiercely for Lily's needs with insurance companies and equipment suppliers, learned to navigate the complex systems that govern special education and medical care. She threw birthday parties and holiday celebrations, created traditions that belonged only to them. When Lily turned 8, Elena made a difficult decision. She legally changed her own name, adding Lily's guardian to her identification documents, making the relationship official in every way except adoption, which would have required exposing Lily's biological parentage. Hastings helped her navigate the legal complexities, ensuring that if anything ever happened to him, Elena's guardianship would transfer seamlessly to the backup attorneys Victor had designated. "You're building something remarkable," Hastings told her during one of their quarterly meetings to review Lily's trust and care plans. "Victor would be proud. I know that may not matter to you, but I think it's important, you know. He chose well when he chose you." "I didn't do this for Victor," Elena said, a truth she'd learned deeply over the years. "I did it for Lily. And honestly, I did it for me too. Loving her has made me a better person than I ever would have been otherwise." On Lily's 9th birthday, something extraordinary happened. She'd been working with a new augmentative communication device, a tablet programmed with pictures and words that allowed her to express complex thoughts beyond her verbal capabilities. During the birthday party, with staff and volunteers and Elena surrounding her, Lily used the device to spell out a message. "Thank you for choosing me," it read. "I love my life because of you." Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she knelt beside Lily's wheelchair. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't have to thank me. You're the gift. You've given me a purpose, a family, a reason to be the best version of myself. I'm the one who should be thanking you." Lily smiled, her gray-green eyes, Victor's eyes, shining with happiness. Then she used the device to spell one more message. "We're lucky. We found each other." And Elena realized Lily was right. Against all odds, through tragedy and loss and the complicated legacy of a dying man's final act of love, they had found each other, had built something real and beautiful and permanent out of the wreckage of Victor's empire. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena pulled out Victor's letters for the first time in years. She read his final request, to let him disappear from Lily's story, to make her narrative about who she was becoming rather than who she'd come from. And Elena realized she'd accomplished exactly that. Lily knew she was adopted, knew her biological parents had died, but she didn't carry the weight of being Victor Hale's daughter. She was just Lily, a girl who loved music and books and silly jokes, who worked hard in therapy, who had a mama who showed up for her every single time. Elena added one final document to the safe where she kept Victor's letters and the USB drive of his empire's secrets. It was a letter of her own, written to Lily, to be opened when the girl turned 18. Dearest Lily, by the time you read this, you'll be an adult, able to understand complexities that would have been overwhelming when you were younger. I want to tell you the whole truth about where you came from and how you came into my life. Your father's name was Victor Hale. He was a complicated man who did terrible things but who loved you with a fierceness that ultimately redeemed him. He built an empire on violence and control, but when he learned he was dying, he used the last months of his life to dismantle everything he'd created so that you could be safe. He asked me to protect you, and I said yes. Not because I owed him anything, but because the moment I met you, I knew you were meant to be mine. Not biologically, not even legally in the traditional sense, but in every way that matters. You have his eyes, Lily, but you have your mother Alexandra's courage, her kindness, her belief that every life matters, and you have whatever pieces of me have rubbed off over the years. Stubbornness, love of books, tendency to make silly faces when you're trying to make someone laugh. You are not defined by the circumstances of your birth or the sins of your father or the limitations of your disability. You are defined by your choices, your relationships, your capacity for joy despite challenge. You are defined by being loved unconditionally and learning to love in return. I don't know what your life will look like when you read this. I hope you've exceeded every expectation, reached goals we couldn't imagine when you were small. But even if you haven't, even if your path looks different than we dreamed, know this: you are exactly who you were meant to be. And I am honored every single day to be your mama. Love always, Elena. She sealed the letter and placed it in the safe, confident that when the time came, Lily would be ready to understand the full story. But until then, their story would continue to be what it had always been. Two people who chose each other, who built a family out of love and commitment and the simple act of showing up. 10 years after Victor's death, Elena sat in the audience at Cedar Ridge's annual celebration ceremony, watching Lily receive an award for most improved communication skills. The 18-year-old stood with the help of her walker, her speech slow but clear as she thanked her therapists, her friends, and finally, her mama. I wouldn't be here without her, Lily said, looking directly at Elena. She chose me when she didn't have to. She loved me when it was hard. She showed me what family really means. Thank you, Mama, for everything. The applause was thunderous, but Elena barely heard it through her tears. This was Victor's legacy. Not an empire built on blood, but a daughter who'd thrived because someone had chosen to love her without reservation. This was redemption, not for Victor, but for the belief that broken beginnings didn't determine endings, that love could transform tragedy into triumph. After the ceremony, walking through the gardens with Lily, Elena thought about how far they'd both come. She'd arrived at Cedar Ridge a decade ago as a divorced woman running from her past, and she'd found a future she could never have imagined. Had become a mother to a child who wasn't hers by birth, but was absolutely hers by choice. Mama, Lily said, using her walker to navigate the familiar paths, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Do you ever regret it, choosing me? Your life would be easier if you hadn't. Elena stopped walking, turning to face her daughter. Lily, look at me. My life would be emptier, smaller, less meaningful if I hadn't chosen you. Yes, it's been hard sometimes. Yes, there have been challenges I never expected. But regret? Never. Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Lily smiled. That radiant expression that never failed to light up Elena's world. Good, because you're the best thing that ever happened to me too. We're even. They continued walking as the sun set over Cedar Ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. And Elena thought about Victor's final words to her, his hope that she'd remember the man he could have been instead of the man he was. She had done him one better. She'd forgotten Victor Hale entirely. and remembered only the father who'd loved his daughter enough to disappear so she could thrive. That was the only part of his story worth preserving, not the empire or the power or the violence, but the moment when he'd chosen something bigger than himself. And in doing so, he'd given Elena the greatest gift of her life, a daughter who taught her that love was measured not in grand gestures, but in showing up, day after day, choosing someone again and again until the choice became as natural as breathing. The Ghost King was gone, but his daughter remained, loved and whole, and exactly where she belonged. And that was the ending Victor had earned, not redemption for himself, but the knowledge that something good had survived him, something pure that bore no mark of his sins. Just a girl named Lily, and the woman who'd chosen to be her mama. That was legacy enough.